Well, hello. Fancy seeing you here. It's another day. It's another stream in fascist America. And it's Friday. Yay. Also a long weekend. I don't care about Easter. I know some people do. If you celebrate it, great. If not, who cares? um, anyway, welcome to whatever this is. An attempt at providing education, advocacy, and a little common sense in this digital wasteland. My name is Aubri Devashrayee. And it is Culture Corner today. Woo! I'm going to talk about the various things that I'm excited about in culture lately. Honestly, this is one of my favorite segments that I do on this stream because I'm a pretentious bitch and think that my opinions are correct. So, you get to deal with that. Hopefully you agree. If not, you can leave. I'm kidding. Anyway, today I want to finish going over some current events. There have been some more updates with the war with Iran, some updates in politics. And then there was this video by FD Signifier that I've been wanting to watch for a bit for the past few days, called Left Tube Op Tier List. So I want to give that a watch. I said I would watch that update from Utah News on Mormons leaving the Republican Party on my own, but I did not watch it on my own, so I'm going to make you all sit through it as well. Just get that out of the way. Maybe I'll watch that first just to get it over with. Okay. This is how I manage the triggering nature of things, having left Mormonism. And then we'll get into Culture Corner. Slayyyter came out with a new album. It's very good. It has some let's try that again. It has some problematic elements in it that I want to talk about and discuss. She recently did an interview on the Zach Sang show, so I want to watch that. I want to play a Tinashe song that I love. I think it might be one of my top Tinashe songs. There are a lot of people who know her most recently from the song Nasty, which is excellent. And it was a single that came out with her album Quantum Baby. But she has been working for a very long time, creating very excellent art. So I'm going to do a little bit of educating on some of the really great stuff that she has done. And then I saw that Hassan Minhaj had Riz Ahmed on his podcast, on his YouTube channel, so I want to watch that. Because I've been watching the show Bait with my partner. We've been watching it. It's on Amazon. I know, all of these platforms. We're all complicit and required to make all of these different compromises with capitalism. Anyway, I mean, being on Twitch, for example, a Bezos-owned entity, joy. The show Bait is excellent. I thoroughly enjoy it. There has been a lot of music in it that is by Indian artists that I recognize. There is such creative storytelling. The writing is really good. It takes a lot of turns that you don't expect, or at least that I didn't expect. And not to be annoying, but I feel like I'm able to predict the plot of stories a lot of the time. And it's unpredictable. I think it makes a lot of really poignant points about race and othering in society and finding a place and feeling like there is this uphill battle and being seen in a white supremacist colonizer society. And it talks about colonization as a modern concept, which I love, and talks about whether you're selling out, being in the arts, and wanting to get notoriety and fame and wealth, that you have to kind of get to that point in order to really feel like you've made it for a lot of people. It's not enough to just have a living. It's really hard to make a living as an artist, and you have to sell out a lot of the time, at least in capitalist America. So it's very interesting. I highly recommend it. And yesterday, someone recommended a song that was by DAMAGE and Amber Ryann with a song called Same Things. I have not heard of them, but I'll give it a listen. I'm down. I'm down for some new adventures, exploring some new art. I'm always looking for new art because, one, I'm pretentious. Two, it like helps me to keep having a desire to keep going. That's what good art does for me. Bad art makes the opposite happen. It makes me die a little or a lot. Okay. So since we have a funny video that is in the body of the agenda today, I want to just hop right into the politics piece of this, and then we'll get into some of the war updates. But I did want to update you all that yesterday when I was watching, was it yesterday? I think it was yesterday. Everything's blending together. We were watching a John Oliver video on JD Vance, and they had an email up that said, if you emailed has John Oliver fucked a couch at hasjohnoliverfuckedacouch.com, and you email them asking if he's fucked a couch, and I wrote down this email and I emailed that address. And it's legitimate. It's an automatic reply, but I was hoping that would be the case. I was hoping that they would commit that fully. I mean, they have the money to like get that domain. So the automatic reply is, well, my original reply, where is my original? Excuse me. Said, hi, has John Oliver fucked a couch? Thanks. And the automatic reply is, no way! Exclamation point. John Oliver has never fucked a couch. Incredible. Love that. Anyway, I thought that was of great importance to give an update. Since it's the weekend, I have a fun drink. Also, it helps to swallow the news along with it. I'm also wearing a Bratz shirt. I love Bratz dolls. I loved them growing up. And my mom didn't let me have them because she thought they were too skanky. And I related to them a lot. Yes, they have these big heads. I have a big head. Physically, metaphysically, I'll be honest about that. And they had these almond eyes with lined eyes and amazing makeup that I was like, I relate to them way more than Barbies. So I found this at Ross. I love Ross. I also got these earrings recently. They're little knives, and in red, in cursive on them, it says killing it. I love that. I also have these little dragon earrings. I keep forgetting to like talk about the things that I'm wearing since I'm such a pretentious person and I love fashion. I'm wanting to do that more, so there you go. Anyway, let's get this over with. Latter-day Saints are abandoning the Republican Party. It's not just Latter-day Saints, and I don't think there is this mass exodus from the Republican Party, let's be honest. If it is, they're going further right for a lot of people. Some people not. But I don't think there is going to be support hemorrhaging from Utah Republican politics because the politics here are so conservative and the predominant religion is very white supremacist. Literally in Mormon doctrine, it talks about how when you go to heaven, your skin turns white, or like when your skin is white, you have purity. So if that isn't white supremacy, I don't know what is. That gives you a little taste of what it's like to be around here. I don't recommend it, but let's get this over with.
Well, Holly, for at least this century, Utah has been a bright red state, predominantly Republican.
Let's go through this rigmarole of refreshing.
Well, Holly, for
I can usually tell if it's going to do that because I turn on the captions and it doesn't show.
This century, Utah has been a bright red state, predominantly Republican, and a lot of people have felt that that was because of the influence of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and that members of that church are largely Republican, and that's still the case, but the numbers have shifted in a way I think that is surprising to a lot of people, including myself.
It's not just Utah. This is a national trend, and it's one that is looking, I think, really about maybe not so much the whys, but the what is happening. And so here to break it down, we have Brigham Tomka with the Deseret News, who wrote a story about that.
There are so many people named Brigham in Utah. If there ever is a sign that someone is a descendant of Mormon colonizers, I am as well. So they have a name like Brigham or Joseph or like Moroni. Lehi. There aren't many people named Lehi. I think there was like one person that I heard of named Lehi. There's a town. There's a city named Lehi.
This morning. Thanks for joining us, Brigham.
Yeah, thank you so much. This already starts with an interesting Utah tie before we even get to the subject matter, and that is that YouGov's lead researcher, Brad Jones, who's a BYU grad, published an analysis last week of 2 decades of cooperative election survey data, and that is BYU, the largest election poll
Mormon
in
college
the nation. And what it
Utah.
found is that over
Unfortunately,
the past 2
I
decades,
went there.
actually every major demographic in the country identified less as a Democrat or identified less with the Democratic Party. This was a trend that you saw across age, race, education barriers, with the exception of white, college-educated men and Latter-day Saints. Latter-day Saints were the only religious group in the entire country that actually identified less with the Republican Party over that 20-year period and identified more with the Democratic Party. And it was about a 10-point shift away from Republicans and about a 5-point gain among Democratic affiliation and no affiliation at all. So that's kind of the big picture, and that's why Latter-day Saints stood out in this analysis of 2 decades worth of data.
To be honest, I'm curious about when this was done, and I think there are more people who are going independent than they are to the Democratic Party, because there are people who are still very conservative, but they are upset that people aren't conservative enough. There are many people that think like that. That's my take.
So members are drifting away from the Republican Party, not necessarily all going to Democrats. It seems like from your from what you publish here, Brigham, about 50-50 split between moving toward the Democrats and moving toward a more independent-based ideology.
Yeah, and so the important context to keep in mind is that as opposed to 60 to 70% of Latter-day Saints identifying as Republicans, it's now 55 to 60%, right? So whereas 20 years ago, Latter-day Saints were by far the most Republican-leaning religious group in the country, it's now white evangelicals and Latter-day Saints come in second place, right? Yeah. So it's still a very Republican voting bloc. But
yeah, that's something that a lot of people don't realize, that Mormons, there is so much crossover with MAGA, especially. If you're already in a cult, because the LDS Church is a cult, I can say this is what I think. It's mind control, having deconstructed these ideologies and conditioning. It's much easier for people to fall into other cults. People who find a demagogue figure who tells them what to think and who postures as having all the answers and being like quote unquote strong, which is just like mean. That resonates with a lot of people because it is replicated throughout the LDS church. The church is extremely patriarchal. There are literal roles that are called a patriarch, and only men can have what they call the priesthood, which is the power of God on earth. Women do not have access to this, and it is required for you to be in a heterosexual marriage in order to get into heaven and be sealed in the temple. And in order to get into the temple, you have to pay 10% of your income every month to the church, which they then invest into buying up indigenous stolen land and also investing it in the stock market. We also have learned recently that Epstein was in contact with church officials to get a pipeline of victims to victimize and traffic. So this is a little taste of what it is like there.
The trend is the opposite of where you see in every other group across the country.
Let's talk a little bit about maybe why. So first of all, what was the peak that we saw?
Yeah, so maybe this won't come as a surprise to your listeners, but we saw a peak in Republican affiliation. So this is people self-identifying with the Republican Party in 2012 when we had Mitt Romney, a Latter-day Saint, as the Republican nominee for president. Afterwards, You saw actually a spike in no affiliation, kind of went up and down. But then what you saw was
I'm ashamed to say this is when I was still brainwashed. The first time I voted, I was old enough to vote for that presidential election, and I voted for Mitt Romney. That is to my shame. I was still very brainwashed, so that's my excuse. But this just goes to show how ingrained it all is. People don't want to have to critically think. That is not encouraged in the LDS church. Questions are not encouraged. Criticism certainly is not encouraged. And people are ostracized if they ask questions or are rocking the boat too much. And this is really scary because this leads to generations of people who just go along with the status quo or the predominant expectation of church leaders. They aren't overtly political, like they are political, but they try to present as not being overtly political, especially with their like anti-queer, anti-trans, racist, ableist policies. So that is the way that they get involved in politics. And people just go along with whatever the leadership is leaning towards at the time. People talk about politics over the pulpit. There is a thing called testimony meeting in Mormonism. I don't know why I stumbled over that. There is testimony meeting that happens once a month. And this is when people are fasting for the day. And this is where people get up and bear their testimony to the entire congregation. And let me tell you, the things that are said from the pulpit during testimony meeting are really wild and concerning. And people are like desperate to show the involvement of God in their life, and like that's fine, but it also has a very harmful effect of people just saying weird shit. I'm like thinking of some particular instances and I don't even really know how to talk about them, of like people just going off on tangents and just like talking about their own political views, not even really tying it into a religion, sometimes overtly tying it into a religion. That is super common. So the fact that we actually are seeing people leave the Republican Party, I think there are younger people who are leaving. This is a pattern within the church as well, of younger people are leaving the church. So we may have people leave the Republican Party before they leave the church because ultimately that is where people get their political viewpoints. So that is not super surprising that there are people who are leaving, especially young people, I'm guessing, but it's because things are so strict and young people have access to the internet and they're like, oh, that you can actually like live and have fun. Anyway, I'll shut up.
Consistent dip during President Donald Trump's first term in office, where it went down below 60%, and then that actually hovered around 55% during President Joe Biden's term in office, and so it didn't go back up. And anyway, so it seems that it kind of leveled off at that point, although the most recent cooperative election survey data from last year shows about a 5-point jump in Republican affiliation. And so that could be a sign of something, but it's hard to base any conclusions off of 1 year.
Do we know, and I don't suppose this would be in the stats, Brigham, whether this is the result of Trump himself or is just overall less satisfaction with the Republican Party?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And this particular analysis didn't get into that, but the different interpretations coming from this data scientist like Brad Jones, he said that, well, the common denominator we see between...
I doubt that in these surveys they're directly asking about Trump, especially if it is directed towards Mormons, because they are very Trump, they're very pro-Trump, and I doubt they would want to actually see the results of that.
The white college-educated men and atheists, which were another group that moved towards the Democratic Party and Latter-day Saints. It doesn't seem like maybe they'd have too much in common, except for that they are all disproportionately college-educated. And one of the key dividing lines in American politics during the Trump era has been educational polarization. That's emerged as one of the driving forces of political realignment. So that's one piece. The poorly educated. From BYU professor Quinn Monson, who kind of wrote the book on Latter-day Saint political involvement, is that these kinds of changes don't happen quickly. People rarely change their mind about politics. And so what is more likely behind these changes is actually generational replacement, is that the new generation of Latter-day Saint voters are less loyal or less tied to the Republican Party.
That's really interesting. Look, you mentioned this is...
the church changed their magical underwear garments. I used to wear those because they were losing so many young people. They had sleeves on them. They went down to your knees. They're a little bit shorter now. And they are like tanks. I don't know. I was in the church at like the worst time possible. And it's probably because there's so many people like me in my age group that were leaving that they actually made these changes. So like the younger people, they're still leaving, but it's a little bit easier. They don't have to go to 3 hours of church. They don't have to not talk to their families on missions. It's like there has been a lot that has changed because they are hemorrhaging young people.
National poll. And I think it was a BYU professor. I think you were correct when we were talking offline. Jake Ruff, is that his name? Who looked at Utah County voters. So this is really specifically, I live down in Utah County and we're a hotbed of red. But I will say this is super interesting. So this is just 10 years
there.
And these are new voters.
Utah County is where BYU is located in Provo. And it is very close to Orem, where Utah Valley University is. And that is where Charlie Kirk was assassinated.
Voter registration, party affiliation. So in before 2017, 73% were registering as Republicans. By 2026, the new registrations now we're just to a plurality. We're in 49%, and last year it was 51%. So
I need
for
to
the
step
entire
out for
year.
just a sec,
we're dropping even
but I'll be
in
right
Utah
back.
County people who are affiliating with the Republican Party, and I do think I see that too with the younger generation, right? So what Gen X maybe, that they're finding a conflict between what they're seeing and hearing from political parties and what they're seeing and hearing from their church. And when you have a focus on peacemaking and the Constitution and loving your neighbor, there does seem to be some conflict.
It's interesting. In January, I did an analysis of this same cooperative election survey data, but then another massive survey called the Nationscape survey. And I focused on Gen Z Latter-day Saints, and that was a large enough sample size in those surveys where you could kind of draw some conclusions. And what it found is that, yes, this youngest cohort of Latter-day Saint voters was kind of fleeing the GOP label. They didn't want to tie themselves down to that label, but a majority of them still voted for President Donald Trump and also held the same conservative policy positions as their parents. And so it's an interesting dynamic where it seems like maybe the Republican Party might not feel as home to these young voters as it did a decade or two ago, but they still side with the Republican Party at the end of the day in many cases.
I have one other follow-up question with that. Can we clarify again the church's position on political parties?
Yeah, so in October 2024, the church reaffirmed its position, which is that it does not endorse, promote, or oppose political parties in their platforms or candidates for political office, but then it encouraged members to be active, engaged citizens to run for office. And we've also heard coming from the top levels of church leadership that there are reasons that active, faithful Latter-day Saints will find to vote for parties and candidates across the political spectrum, and that should not be used as an indicator, of their standing within the church.
Yeah, so this is probably more of a comment than a question, Brigham. But there had been talk in Utah that as people migrated into the state and the population of Latter-day Saints became less of a majority, that we would be less of a Republican state. But that hasn't occurred, which tells me, based on what you're saying, that maybe the people migrating into the state are largely Republican. You know what I mean? Because our numbers are staying the same.
Yes,
Even though
I think so. The people who are moving in from out of state, like a lot of people from California, they're people that are going in and buying up all these properties in Park City. And it's a form of gentrification, and it's not like it's that much cheaper here than other places, but people come here because of the like quote unquote family values and conservative nature. I guess there's some people that like the outdoors. That to me is a more valid reason to be here. Utah has some very beautiful outdoors environments. Utah has a very beautiful environment. And you can tell that I am not one of these people because of how I said that. But that seems to be more legitimate to me. Or at least favorable. It's a little more favorable.
Latter-day Saints may be dropping a little bit.
No, that's a great point. And last week I did a story highlighting newly released IRS data from 2022 to 2023. So a little bit dated, but that's the only data that really shows you where people are moving from, because it shows where their tax filings were from the previous time. And the top origin source for people moving to Utah was California. And it was about 15,000 people just in that year. But who knows? Maybe it's the Republican-leaning Californians that want to move to Republican-leaning Utah.
I think that might be the case. Thanks, Brigham. That was Brigham Tomkay with the Deseret News.
All right. Now that that's over and done with, I guess I didn't have to. Kamala Harris's message to Utahns? Fuck that. I'm so over her. So disappointing. Okay, getting into the war updates, there was a fighter jet that was shot down by the Iranian military. And this is new. I didn't know this. Black Hawk helicopters also hit by Iranian fire. My God, the U.S. is completely choking. Just no sort of strategy. It is really embarrassing for the U.S. military. I mean, I don't particularly care if they're embarrassed, but because it's good to help with the decline of empire. But yeah, they are so incompetent, the people who are in charge.
Judy, that is right. We've just learned that Iran shot down that second plane and it crashed into a neighborhood. We know that the pilot here is safe.
A major escalation in the nearly 5-week war. U.S. officials say it appears an American fighter jet was shot down by Iran. Iranian state media sharing these images of wreckage, which ABC cannot independently verify. The aircraft was a two-seater F-15 operated by a pilot and a weapons systems officer. One member of the crew was recovered, and the search continues for the other. A U.S. Air Force one-seater A-10 Warthog attack jet also crashed in the Persian Gulf region this on Friday. According to a U.S. official, the pilot on board was safely rescued. Just 2 days ago, President Trump said Iran was decimated both economically and militarily.
Yeah, he's said a lot of things.
Their radar is 100% annihilated. We are unstoppable as a military force.
But Iran has continued its retaliatory strikes.
I think the military
Unstoppable,
campaign is going to continue. The Iranians are going to continue doing what they're doing, striking the region, trying to interfere with shipping in the Straits of Hormuz.
This downing of the fighter jet comes as President Trump escalates his threats against Iran's infrastructure. On social media Thursday, the president writing, "The U.S. military hasn't even started destroying what's left in Iran. Bridges next, then electric power plants." Trump saying the U.S. blew up 3 Iranian bridges, sharing this video on his social media, and continuing to warn Iran to make a deal before it's too late. Iran's Fars news agency saying at least 8 civilians were killed and 95 injured in a U.S.-Israeli attack on a bridge near Tehran. Iran, however, not backing down. The foreign minister there posting, "Striking civilian structures, including unfinished bridges, will not compel Iranians to surrender."
Yeah,
And
that's a
right
war
now,
crime.
we know of 13 U.S. service members who have been killed during Operation Epic Fury, and nearly 370 others have been hurt. Judy?
That's as far as we know. Everyone is saying, from what I've seen, that the numbers are extremely underreported, that the Pentagon is not being honest about how many deaths there are of military personnel. So, keeping that in mind. This is a video that I saw by, well, that was out of order. Okay. Let's watch this first. Trump budget proposes $1.5 trillion for defense while cutting domestic programs. We always have money for war and bombs and killing people and not for actually supporting life. I wonder who runs the country. I wonder who benefits from this. Seems to be the 1%.
$500 billion for the U.S. military.
The budget request also includes proposals
Absurd.
for broad cuts.
The people who are like, we're in debt, the debt is so big, how are we gonna get out of debt? Are the worst ones at getting us further into debt because of the rampant, completely irresponsible, immoral military spending.
The social and environmental programs across the federal government. Ross Ketchke is live in Washington with more on this. Ross.
Good afternoon. This would be the single biggest increase in defense spending since all the way back in World War II, and it comes as the broader U.S. economy is beginning to feel many of the effects of the ongoing war with Iran.
And if they do something, we have a great country and we have a balanced budget.
At the White House Easter lunch this week, President Trump outlined his budget request for Congress, a proposed spending plan centered around record funding for the U.S. military.
This is where he said that we don't have money for daycare. Like, he overtly included that in the speech.
We have to take care of one thing, military protection. We have to guard the country.
The president is asking lawmakers to approve roughly $1.5 trillion in defense spending. The request includes tens of billions of dollars to kickstart the building of a new fleet of warships and advancing the president's Golden Dome missile defense system. According to the budget outline, the military investments would be offset by slashing spending to what the White House describes as woke, weaponized, and wasteful programs, and by shifting the cost of some social services down to the state level.
It's not possible for us to take care of daycare, Medicaid, Medicare, all these individual things. They can do it on a state basis.
The president's budget request comes as the war with Iran is making its mark on the U.S. economy. Gas prices surging to more than $4 a gallon on average across the country. Meanwhile, Wall Street showing resilience, recovering some of the gains that have been wiped out in the weeks since the start of the war. And the labor market posting better than expected job numbers today, adding around 178,000 new jobs in March. But economists warn prolonged fighting in the Middle East will continue to hit consumers. And Democrats in Washington are continuing to pounce on the issue of affordability ahead of November's midterm elections.
The Republicans are the party of costs, high costs. People's costs are going way up.
We don't care, Chuck.
And there are some other highlights from President Trump's
Not
budget
the
request as well.
fearless
Lots to dig
leader we
into
need.
here. Some other things that stick out include roughly $500 million to completely overhaul the nation's air traffic control system and billions of dollars for improvement at national parks here in D.C. and all across the country. Live in Washington, Ross Ketchke, Local 10 News.
Yep. Always money for war. Okay, now we'll get to this. I saw that Rohan posted this just very recently. Said, I'm literally just talking about this to fill the void of attention and information. I was originally going to make a video about Indian food I grew up with in a Mile Olive house from the coast. Food that is difficult to find in Indian restaurants in North America. That is true. We need to update the social mythologies created for brown communities and labor by countries that seek to benefit from them.
Cool. Honestly, I faced like quite a bit of racism over the last few days and weeks. It's really another thing that I've noticed after living in the West for, a few years now. A lot of progressive voices, they tend to speak about racism directed specifically at South Asian people, whether it be from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, these regions, Sri Lanka as well. They only tend to talk about them when like Usha Vance or Vivek Ramaswamy is in the news. And I find that kind of odd.
Yeah.
And I kind of get why that is, because a lot of online spaces is very America-centric, I guess. So the way, the model minority myth works in the U.S. has a lot to do with the U.S. immigration system being hyper-focused on bringing in, quote-unquote, like useful, highly educated immigrants, right? So people with PhDs and blah, blah, blah. It's a certain kind of subsect. And I've spoken about this many times already. So I get it. Unfortunately, in places like, wherever else, really, if we're talking about the diaspora, it's a bit more complicated than what might be the reality of race relations, let's say, in the US. Because, if you bring in a specific, like, hyper-privileged section of society, the white supremacist system will just create the mythology for that specific caste of people. And I get that. But it just does not apply as neatly to many other parts of the world. While the model minority myth might privilege a certain kind of Indian from a certain kind of background, economic status, and so on, it does massively invisibilize the realities of so many working people who are also brown, right? And specifically South Asian. A lot of folks are convinced that it's, not convinced, maybe I guess they're kind of deluding themselves into thinking that this is just an online phenomenon, right?
I've been wondering if like Indian racism is on the rise. If you're on the internet, it is. If you're in the streets, it's not. But on the internet, apparently anti-Indian racism is going through the roof. It's a guy in the crowd. Have you ever experienced racism? It's an Indian guy raised his hand and said, yeah. I was walking today and white person handed me a pamphlet that said Indians are genociding the white race. You think Indians are genociding the white race and your response is a pamphlet? Fucking man up, punch somebody in the face. You non-violent Mahatma Gandhi little bitch. Hit somebody, goddamn.
In Canada.
When a lot of us know it's not. Especially those of us who have to be out and about a lot, in people's faces. It's definitely not an online phenomenon only. In fact, there's been a string of murders in Canada of people who look visibly South Asian. And a lot of Punjabis have been receiving the brunt of this, as usual, honestly, because of the turban. There's this very specific signifier, right? A physical identifier. Like this one incident in Alberta, I'll put it up on the screen, but a random group of white dudes rolled up beside this one dude's window and just opened fire and just killed him. Like, it's just a random killing.
Right now we need support for the family. not the hate.
Two men still shaken and disturbed after seeing their childhood friend be shot and killed on a busy highway in broad daylight. We're not showing their faces because they now fear for their safety. These two were in a car Saturday afternoon driving along Highway 2 for a trip to Banff. South of Leduc, they say the car was in the left lane when a pickup truck already
Wait, are they saying the people who are in the car fear for their safety? If yes, I thought they were talking about the aggressors, the killers.
aggressively pulled up beside them, fired a gun, killing the driver, 22-year-old Barinder Singh.
As we heard the gunshot, we really scared why they are shooting us, because we did nothing. We didn't even try to overtake them. We don't doing any race, or we didn't do anything. We are just enjoying our own company.
And it was just because he was brown. And the authorities here have the audacity to be like, oh, is it a hate crime? I don't know. We're still investigating.
March 17th, 2026, RCMP located what we believe to be the suspect vehicle in the area of Canoe Lake, Saskatchewan. As has already been reported, on March 21st, 2026, RCMP arrested 18-year-old Lloydminster resident Jimmy Gassner. We have seen no evidence to suggest that this attack was motivated by hatred or racial bias against any specific group.
Oh my
Come on,
God.
guys. Come on.
Yeah, exactly. That is such a joke. Jesus Christ. The thing is with fascism is that even though there are certain groups in the US that are given a little more privilege, or where there are especially people from privileged castes that have immigrated here, there has been a quick turn on Indian people with this fascist regime. And not to minimize what he's saying, because it is rising in the US, but it's rising against brown people, especially brown and black people, people of color. And this is not isolated. When fascism rises in the world, it has a ripple effect and emboldens white supremacists to act in violent ways in other parts of the world. That's why we've seen all of these neo-Nazi rallies come up more in Europe, and how we're seeing these hate crimes rise in Canada. It is a direct result of the fascist violence that they feel they are allowed to act on because of this permission structure of seeing ICE brutalize people, of seeing ICE kill people, that it makes it so the people who have similar sentiments about people of color, meaning just racism, in other places of the world, that they're like, oh, that's happening, especially in the heart of the empire, then we can do this here.
Jeez. I just find it really odd that, we have to wait until some Usha Vance or whoever the hell from some right-wing, conservative American party opens their mouth, and then we talk about, South Asian issues on these internet spaces, right?
Yeah.
That's weird. That's really weird.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, no one is talking about the fact that Canada now has the highest amount of deaths of international students globally.
Oh my God.
Of Indian international students globally. And that's really alarming. So,
Yeah, I didn't
I
know that.
there's a lot of
Jesus.
leftist movement happening in Canada. The NDP has new leadership, which is very interesting. But I still haven't really seen a lot of prominent politicians talk about the very obvious rise in anti-Indian hatred and hate crimes and murders and killings of Indian people. It's like people pretend it's not happening, right? And when you do point it out, people's go-to whataboutery is, oh, but you guys have caste and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, bro, you motherfuckers live in caste.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like people don't even realize
Yeah.
that the model minority archetype that they've, deployed upon random Indian people from the US, by the way, is like a casteist signifier.
Yes.
That they've created and transposed onto an entire race, right? Don't get me wrong. This is not saying that, conservative Indians don't exist or whatever. They do, okay? And most of this channel is shitting on
unfortunately.
conservative Indians and talking about Indian fascism.
Yep.
But there's a way to fucking talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? You cannot take the existence of, right-wing movements in, XYZ culture and be like, oh, this is why racism against these people is justified. That's just racist, right? I don't know why I need to keep reminding people about this, but the amount of people on the online left, especially in the West, right, who just do not get this. Like, I've had people even say stuff like, I guess a bit of racism against Indians is like the cost of getting more workers' rights and stuff. Like, what? This is insane, but again, this is white leftism. It's a known thing. It's been documented in the West. This is not like a new phenomenon, but yeah, it's just something we deal with.
That was a tool that has been a tool used throughout history, but especially when it comes to labor. Major labor movements around the world is that we have capitalists or people in the status quo that they intentionally try to inspire animosity between the working class when it comes to race relations, but not just race relations, but against women, against queer people, against disabled people, against trans people. So it is a pattern.
To mention again the history of unions in Canada as well, there's a lot of discrimination and white nationalism associated with unions even in the 1800s. So again, this is not too surprising. I don't know how much longer this anti-Indian sentiment and racism and like overt physical violence is going to continue. I don't know. Yeah, who knows? Let's see. But anyway, I just wanted to shine a light on these realities because it's something that I see all the time, right? And I've lived in 3 different countries now and experienced different forms of bigotry, and I've seen and felt what different kinds of bigotries look like from different communities, right? But white supremacist society, this is, I think, the most hostile form of bigotry and the most like ignorant form of bigotry I've seen. I don't know, it's very dehumanizing. I think that's what is at the core of it. It's very Brahmin. I keep reminding people caste and casteism is not just in India. Those structures, the purity politics, the morality policing, policing around people's diets, policing around people's religions, policing around like people's way of life and so on and so forth, even the way they dress and whatnot. It all reeks of casteism, right? And the parallels are so clear to me in white supremacy. The denial of the existence of it as well is so familiar. But anyway, I just wanted to share my thoughts on that. And I'll touch base sometime later in the future. I've got some stuff cooking, so let's see what happens with that. Thanks for tuning in.
Cool shot of him riding his bike. Yeah, it's getting worse, unfortunately. Which is why we need to keep talking about these issues, that there is rising racist sentiment throughout the world, especially as we see this war against Iran happen. Okay, so moving along, this is the video that I've been wanting to watch for a bit. FD Signifier is talking about ops for LeftTube. So let's watch this.
It feels like Jordan Peterson's been replaced with this guy. It's become very clear to me.
Uh-oh.
It feels like Jordan Peterson's been replaced with this guy. It's become very clear to me that if I want a quick buck, if I want to get a quick check, I'm going to need to talk about whoever the fuck this is. Jordan Peterson felt like a worthy
I want a quick buck.
Jordan Peterson felt like someone worth contending with. CJ the X basically low-key tapped out of making videos because they didn't finish their Jordan Peterson video. Everyone is worse for not having had CJ finish that video. CJ, I'm gonna text you about this before this comes out, but we're begging you to come back to us. I know you hate it here, but just for the people, CJ, at least finish that video. The thing I have in my head is
I love that.
The LeftTube went from Batman villains, right? We went from the Joker, Two-Face, Scarecrow, you know what I'm saying? The Riddler. We went from like high tier real villains in the last 5 or 6 years. This motherfucker right here is just a really good looking artist that has a following. Like
artist.
This dude right here is
not artist, autist, like someone who's on the autistic spectrum. But he's not even that handsome. Sue me.
Not worth my time. It's not worth anybody's time. I kind of feel worse for the online right or whatever the nebulous community we engage and we're adversaries with is. They used to have Jordan Peterson, and now they have Clavicular. Asmongold and Clavicular is like who's dominating their meta right now. We went from the Joker to Electro, from Two-Face to Kraven the Hunter or whatever his name is. The Vulture. Flash villains, even worse. Kite Man. So this got me to thinking, we need to make the online left rogues gallery tier list. Because I'm having fun. We're going to rank historically.
We need some levity
online left
with this
villains
bullshit
of the week. All right. So what are we labeling these? What is a high tier villain? In my head, it's like it starts with slop merchant on site. Legitimate threats could be under that. Problematic. And what goes in the middle? Villain of the week, rage bait. Ooh, counterinsurgent. Okay, hold up. That's a good one. I think 7 is enough. Ooh, psyop. We'll see. We'll start with these. I feel like I need a couple of more black excellences up here. I know exactly who it's gotta be. Nah, we gonna save Jay-Z. We gonna save
that's
Jay-Z
a good one
for another time, but we gotta get Oprah up here. Nah, we gonna leave
Another
Stephen
good
A.
one.
for now. We got too many. Look at this list. Look at this.
There's a lot of people.
We got some work. We're gonna be here all day. So we're gonna try to be quick. We're gonna try to be quick with it. Beat a chick, did I have him up here? I didn't mean hold up. I got Ari Lennox on here. I downloaded the wrong shit. Hold up. So the logic, at least for now, is at the bottom, it's kind of like low-key, should we even bother talking about this other than for clicks? Other than for clicks, what are we really doing here? At the top, it's, hey, somebody should do something. I'm not going to say too much. I'm just saying, if and when it happens, there's probably not enough being said or done about the problem this person is saying. Fresh and Fit. I feel like Fresh and Fit are rage bait. I won't put them at slop just yet, especially with, is it fit now? I feel like Myron Gaines is fit, right? So Myron Gaines has actively wandered into right-wing provocateur categories. He's now hypercharging FBA stuff to an extent, like FBA ADOS nonsense. So that requires some redress where it's not just complete slop nonsense. So I can't put him in slop merchant just yet. Donald Trump is definitely on site. It is what it is.
Yeah,
Ben Shapiro.
exactly.
I feel like we beat Ben Shapiro. And that's another thing. People in this bottom category, we won that. So it's kind of like it is what it is.
Yeah, he's definitely falling, Ben Shapiro. He still has some viewership, but he's done.
You know what? Hold up. That makes me think we do gotta hold up. So we gotta make something below slot merchant, which is washed. Love it. Thank you, chat. J.K. Rowling. First off, is she sick too? She gets hired in rage bait because Harry Potter is still a huge thing. Until she's dead, we are going to have to constantly contend with one of the greatest kids things ever being written by,
a turf
it's kind of
freak.
like her, Lovecraft, R. Kelly, like they're all in like a similar category. Walt Disney, Roald Dahl, right? Like a lot of these folks, they can't just be disregarded to like we don't pay attention. Like as soon as my kids start engaging with Harry Potter for real, I'm gonna have to be like, hey, just so you know, children, here's some things to understand about, art versus artists and da-da-da-da. Like,
you know who, not Voldemort,
if you gotta
the
give
author.
A disclaimer, it's at least problematic, Yeah, she hasn't stopped hurting people, exactly. We'll give her problematic. Elon Musk, does he deserve on-site? I kind of want on-site to be more specific. And you know what that is true. Problematic should be above villain of the week. Yeah, no, you're right. Thank you.
Yeah, he needs to go.
Owning like a ton of social media and government contracts. You're right.
Yeah, and everything that he's done with the Doge bullshit, his eugenics, his involvement with Epstein, his idiotic space exploration, him being part of the industrial war complex. It goes on and on and on.
Gary V, washed. I'm gonna put
I don't
in
even know who that
videos
is.
just to make this extra special. Oh, this is dope. I'm gonna put in videos that I think handle certain shit. And I'll never forget, shout out to Thought Slime. Thought Slime's Gary V video is such a perfect distillation of, it's like such a quintessential bread tube takedown video. It's perfect. It is so well written, so well argued, so well researched, so well performed. If there was like a course on making a bread tube video, Thought Slime's video on Gary V was just like, mwah. I watched it and I was like, yes, this is, I need to pay attention to what happened in this.
Maybe I'll watch that next week.
Joe Rogan. Where do we put Joe Rogan? He's not washed because we still have to deal with Joe Rogan. Well, yeah, because he's still huge, right? He's still huge. I think he goes in problematic above. Ooh, is he counterinsurgent? Actually, he might be counterinsurgent. That might be exactly why that tier exists. The counterinsurgent tier exists because it's people who are dangerous and prominent, and the danger is not fully identified. He has fallen off, yeah, but he still puts up big numbers. Vince McMahon, listen, y'all. I know I'm planning the Vince McMahon video. I'll put him at legitimate. Like, do y'all understand how evil this man is? I kind of got to put him on site just because he's incredibly evil. He is so evil. It's crazy how evil he is.
I'm looking him up.
And we don't have no good Vince McMahon videos. And I'm gonna have to be the one to do that one I see. It really and it's not just that he's evil, it's that his evil created the framework for our modern evil, like the way people move. Like Donald Trump said outright that he learned his game, his current shtick from Vince McMahon. On top of being also a predator, also a hyper-capitalist, also an abuser. Like, it's wild. All right, Fuentes.
Okay, just getting a quick overview. Businessman and former professional wrestling promoter. We see already from here, steroid supplier trial, sexual misconduct allegations, personal life. Talking about his wealth, political activity, donated a lot of money. Yeah, what's this? So he's had a few of these. Jesus. Oh my God. He's been prolific too. Yeah, he belongs there.
Fuentes is sadly a legitimate threat. So we got to make this point. I need y'all to understand that in the early 2020s, Nick Fuentes was gone. It was a wrap for him. It was over for Nick Fuentes. And because of Destiny, he made an effective comeback.
Yeah.
Period.
I
He
agree.
was not being platformed anywhere. I don't know how they hooked up, or I guess it was through Lauren Southern, and they were doing some weird, well, allegedly they were doing some weird sex polyamory stuff. I don't know the full tea there. But out of nowhere, Fuentes made a comeback. He did a podcast tour, and now he's meeting with possible future presidential candidates. And counterinsurgency is important because Destiny spent most of the last 3 years defending the genocide from the left to the left. Well, how do I even describe what he did with the genocide? So I can't call Fuentes counterinsurgent because he hasn't quite been accepted into the mainstream right yet, from my perspective. Like, there's still a lot of fighting around whether to let him in, and I don't think he will make it in, because it's ironic that somehow AIPAC and Zionism is saving us from Nick Fuentes taking over the Republican Party in a weird way. Umar low-key washed right now. I don't know if y'all realize that. Umar low-key washed, but I'm going to put him above everybody else because I still got to deal with Umar. But Umar's low-key washed. When his daughters popped up, did y'all peep that? I don't even really want to get into it too deep. When he was exposed as a deadbeat dad, and then he had something go on with his bank, with his money, he suddenly disappeared. He was everywhere for years, and in the last 6 or so months, he's vanished. And so I'm hoping he finally ran his course. We'll see. All right, Ayn Rand. I'm just saying, I need that good Ayn Rand video. Where's that good Ayn Rand video? Can we ask Broy Deschanel for that? Can we get Unlearning Economics? Yeah. Did Sean do an Ayn Rand video? If he didn't, that's a perfect person to do it. Did Sean do an Ayn Rand video? It don't look like it. You know, we need that. We need that. Worthy opponents. All right, Sneeko. Sneeko suddenly came back to YouTube, so I can't put him in washed. So we're going to put him in slop merchant. It was washed up until YouTube let him back. And he was gone from my feed for forever, but he's been popping up again. And he's doing this, and then him and Andrew Tate are having a fight, I heard. It's a thing. The Clintons, I'm going to put in counterinsurgent. Not enough people they should be on site. I agree.
Yeah.
You can't be on site. Here's the rule. If the average moderate liberal does not agree that you're on site, then you actually got to be counterinsurgent, because that means we got more education to do. Does that make sense? If I have to explain it to you, then it's not on site. It's the way I see it. If there are fans that will defend whatever the fuckery is and it's not on site, it's another one. Somehow we have forgotten how evil George Bush is.
Yeah.
Which reminds me,
because he's painting
I might
now.
do Hakeem Jeffries though. We got to do Hakeem Jeffries. He got to go on here. In fact, just to not start shit,
I think he's another
I'm gonna take off
counterinsurgent.
Obama. Listen, y'all. Olive branch moment to all my black libs and moderates. Olive branch moment. This one I'm gonna do for y'all because I love y'all and I want y'all to feel me on this. I'm gonna put Hakeem Jeffries on here. I'm gonna put Cory Booker on here just to show I'm trying to meet people where they are. We gonna take Obama off the list. He belongs on this list. But just for the sake of I'm gonna meet y'all where y'all at. We gonna talk about the same exact shit. It's gonna be the same exact conversation. Netanyahu ass tried to sneak off the fucking list. No, you definitely on the list, motherfucker.
Yeah.
Anyway, academics. Academics gets problematic.
I don't know
We
who
put
that is.
academics above JK. Yeah, we put him under JK. Now, academics is problematic because he's still incredibly powerful in the industry. He's still incredibly influential in the industry. He's damn near counterinsurgent because of that. But it's only because it's hip hop and because it's slop hip hop that I'm not putting him higher. Clyburn gets counterinsurgent. That's not Clarence Thomas, that's Jim Clyburn. I understand why you made the mistake. And they also kind of look alike, but very different roles.
Yeah, they do
I have
look
a video
similar.
on Clyburn on the channel. I'll link that too. But he's a definition of counterinsurgency. All right, Tate brothers. Low key, I feel like the Tate brothers are washed. Am I wrong? Who's more washed right now? Tate brothers or Gary Vee? I feel like Gary Vee's more washed. I think Gary Vee was like, all right, I'm done. Gary Vee was like, deuces, I made my money, I'm out. I'm sure he got a
I also don't know who
scam,
Gary Vee is.
Came up and was like, he's out of here. All right, Andrew Scholes gets Villain of the Week. That's our first Villain of the Week. And we put him there because he's not really as dangerous as the people above him, but he's far more relevant than the people below him. Charlie Kirk is definitely washed. I mean, it's the definition of it. Party wants to put him above Gary Vee just because his name still rings bells.
Yeah.
His ghost still haunts the meta, still haunts the community, but his definition of washed. All right, Peter Thiel. Low key, do I put Peter Thiel above Trump? I think Peter Thiel goes above Trump because, like, listen.
I agree. He has been one of the main people that have led to Trump. One of the main people who have funded the conservative legal movement to place conservative judges on all of these circuits, on the Supreme Court, justices. And his influence is sprawling. It can't be understated.
This is my
Agree.
hot, uninformed take, but like in my soul, I don't think we're going to be dealing with Trump for more than another 2 years. As individual, he's either not here literally or not in power by 2029. But Peter Thiel and what he's doing, we're going to have to contend with for the foreseeable future. Like that's the real man behind the curtain. All right, Charlemagne, he gets to be next to his boy. Not a lot to say about Charlemagne. I haven't already said. Him and his boy go in the same category. Killer Mike, I'm gonna be nice and I'm gonna put him in problematic. Low key, Killer Mike's counterinsurgent, but I don't think he's powerful enough to be too much more dangerous. Asmongold, definitely slot merchant. I don't know, is Asmongold dangerous? Like, so I don't know the meta. How dangerous? I know he has a large following, but like, is there a tangible effect from his following?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Him dangerous. I don't put him in the same lane as Fuentes because Fuentes abhorrently projects political power. Like Fuentes has an actual movement that can be mobilized. Whereas Asmongold, it's either people that are going through a phase or people that are never leaving their basement. I think for the sake of it, we'll put him at
or both.
Bait. Just because there's so many of them, you never know. He's a pipeline. That's true. Nicki Minaj. I think you get Villain of the Week. Nicki Minaj ain't hitting on shit. She just disappointing us. You know what I'm saying? Like the Barbs ain't even scary no more. She low-key kind of washed, but she will put out a hit within the next 18 months. And so we'll have to, like, you got to remember, like Nicki is still, Nicki's last album had like 4 or 5 big hits.
Yeah.
She hasn't really fell off. Y'all think she's fell off. She hasn't really fell off. Problematic for turning going, you know what? Yeah, she do need to go up a level.
I agree with that.
Of, like,
I was going to say, I think she should be problematic.
Being so innately queer, to do that heavy of a heel turn on them, you gotta knock her up a notch.
At
Ronald
turning
Reagan.
point.
So is he on site or is he
cozy
washed?
with Trump?
Where do we put Ronald Reagan? Because here's the wild thing. Ronald Reagan isn't evil enough for the political moment. So I got to put him at the bottom of the on-site list.
He's still so
he's
evil.
Dead. Jim Clyburn and Cory Booker are closer to Ronald Reagan than Donald Trump. Ronald Reagan is closer to Mitt Romney or Gavin Newsom. All right, Theo Von. I think Theo Von is rage bait. Is he slop? Because his whole thing is like, I'm dumb.
I guess what this Nazi saying is just as interesting as what this socialist is saying.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson is definitely washed. But so this is an interesting one. So here's the thing. Jordan Peterson was one of the more dangerous figures within the ecosystem. He was the bridge between valid intellectual discourse and right-wing ideology. No, so Kirk and Tate weren't. Kirk and Tate were never taken seriously.
Junk Saint.
Like they had Jordan Peterson debating
Gary Vee's and annoying fly. You don't know who he is.
So the fact that he was debating him is important.
I do think Asmongold is more dangerous than what he put. as well, because I think he has enough momentum behind him. Their movement is dying, but yeah, I agree. I think he has more influence and prominence than what FD Signifier may realize. It is interesting, though, to think about like his real world impact, like if he's able to mobilize people
to contend with, because like Peterson required actual conversation, but his limitations became more apparent over time, and he's gone now. He may never come back, so we're gonna put him in watch for now, but we'll put a pin in him. This dude is at the bottom of slot merchant. The most damning thing about this man's rise to fame, clavicular, is that if he was not good looking, I would never have to have learned his name, which in and of itself is proof of his worldview. Does that make sense? If he looked like Nick Fuentes, I would never have learned his name. But because he looks like Superman, like a guest character from Dawson's Creek, he has garnered attention. He's such an oddity. Yeah, the spectacle of
such a
smashing his
90s
face
reference.
with hammers and drugs.
He
and
does
shit.
look like he
Again, I
would
watched
be on
somebody's
Dawson's
video,
Creek.
and they kept playing him talking. I'm like, this dude's...
I don't think he's that handsome, though.
There's no reason to make a long video just about him, because you kind of know the deal within the first 15 minutes.
Hello, Night and Alive. Welcome.
We don't put Oprah on site. We don't put
Gary
Oprah
V is
on
a hustle
site.
culture
We don't put
influencer.
Oprah on site. I
Okay.
feel it. It's not
Thank
really
you.
appropriate. Counterinsurgent, yeah. If she gets counterinsurgent, do we put her above or below Joe Rogan? No, she got to go below Joe Rogan. All right.
I agree. I think Oprah has had a very harmful effect on the world, especially when we're thinking about all of the people that she's elevated. They turn out to be fascists and grifters. So like Dr. Oz, Dr. Phil, all of these pseudo doctors. Thank you. It was good seeing you, Night and Love. Have a good weekend. My girlfriend is nodding off screen listening. It's a great time for a nap. Bonding. Screen bonding. This is what we do in the modern age.
This guy, if he's who y'all say he is, then he got to be on site. Larry Ellison, yeah, he got to be on site. I need more Larry Ellison videos, less clavicular videos. Chat.
Yep.
Yeah, low key probably next to Theo. All right, Tucker Carlson has graduated to on site.
Yeah.
This man is gonna run for president.
He will.
And he might be, I don't know for sure.
And he's gaining more people from the center, from even the left, because of his stance against Israel. And this is the danger of the Democratic Party not being forceful in coming out against the genocide, and by choosing to fund all of this horrendous death, that it has enabled Tucker Carlson to fill that gap. He should not be there.
If he's legitimately
he's anti-Semitic
president, but he is, it is plausible.
Problematic
it is plausible that he can be
so many other ways.
So he has to be on site. He is the inheritor of the MAGA legacy, whatever that means. But like, because he's not going to be within the machine, I think that may cancel him out. Piers Morgan. We'll put Piers Morgan above academics because they're in the same actual category. You think Piers Morgan is slop? Am I overthinking Piers Morgan's influence? Because I feel like Piers Morgan has managed to be pretty influential. He's more slop than problematic because he's basically a less problematic Rogan, but he doesn't have any profound thoughts. He may be rage bait. That actually may be more appropriate.
Yes.
All right,
he's rage bait for sure. That's like the whole premise of a show.
Nah, that's not real. We put leftist infighting as problematic. We need to box a little bit, y'all. We need to throw hands every once in a while. The problem with leftist infighting is that people think we're not supposed to fight ever. And so people treat every fight like it's a heavyweight match.
Yeah, like it's the end of the world.
It does count better as villain of the week because it's a different person every week. All right, Critical Drinker. Is he still influential enough to be in Slot Merchant? I guess he probably is. I think Critical Drinker is still pulling numbers. He's one of the few from that era that's still around. So we're gonna put him at the bottom of slop merchant. Steven Crowder, washed. And low key, I feel like I gotta put Steven Crowder below Gary Vee because at least I'm sure Gary Vee still got money. This nigga Steven Crowder is probably a trucker now. There's no way he is still collecting checks. All right, Gavin Newsom. We're gonna put Gavin Newsom on counterinsurgent. Now the question for Newsom is, does he go above the Clintons? Listen, we can't put him on site because we would have to explain. I feel like
I like that qualifier. I like that qualifier of like, this is just generally accepted among the masses on site. I don't think he's as bad as the Clintons. That doesn't mean that he doesn't have the potential to be as bad as the Clintons. If we're looking at like what they've done, he's still done a lot of shitty things, has a lot of like horrible stances. But since the Clintons have actually been in power and implemented their bullshit, I would put them above. That's my take. I would put George W. above him as well because he's a war criminal.
He goes above the Clintons, but trust me, it's probably coming. I think I'm gonna put him on site. I think I'm putting Hakeem Jeffries on site.
He goes
I know
above the
I'm breaking my own
Clintons
rule right now, but I hate this nigga so much. And I like if I do
I guess
see this
he
nigga,
is. Hillary like eventually came around to like gay rights, queer rights, and it doesn't seem like Gavin Newsom how he's like, oh, this pronoun talk. That's like, okay, shut up. We have a game of Clue, and it's sitting right here, and there's a character that looks like Gavin Newsom. He has the exact same haircut. Look, is that not Gavin Newsom? That's Gavin Newsom. If he was wearing a black suit and a red tie. It's that capitalist straight back hair that's slicked. The haircut is so icky. It also looks like it does not move. It's like a helmet.
in public, I might swing. Well, actually, never mind. I can't say shit like that on videos. But like, I hate this nigga so much. It's so important for him to just be up a notch above. Can we move JK up a notch? I mean, I've seen so little of JK lately. I don't know if she deserves to go up further. In terms of actual influence, is she influencing anything outside of Twitter, right? I feel like she's been effectively neutralized to just Twitter. Oh, actually, I forgot she's in the UK. I forgot about Turf Island. My bad, y'all. My bad, y'all.
Yeah, she's leading the charge there.
Turf Island. I was being too American.
Turf Island.
She actually got to go up to counterinsurgent. I forgot about Turf Island. My bad, chat. I forget that the UK, y'all and transphobia, it hits different there.
I don't think she's just problematic.
Here's the thing with Cory Booker. Cory Booker is a success story in terms of if you keep hitting a nigga, if you keep like working.
Here's the thing. I don't think Cory Booker himself has the capacity to be a great threat. Like he is going to be out exacting in a very aggressive way his viewpoints, but he does not act in a way that is a legitimate threat where he is just sitting by silent. So that's my take.
Getting people to see, it gets it after a while. Because I don't think Cory Booker, like, remember he tried to do that? He tried to do a filibuster earlier in the year, and everybody was like, man, sit your ass down. Like, he's almost washed. He's not really. He's still powerful.
Well, he did that whole filibuster and didn't mention the genocide at all.
I don't think Cory Booker gets regarded the same way he did 8 years ago. So I'm going to put him under legitimate threat. And Netanyahu's on site. We're going to put Netanyahu above Trump. Only reason he's not going above Thiel and the other guy and Larry Ellison is because
they have
like
more power.
Netanyahu is tied to all these other power aspects.
Yep.
And these other two dudes
they
are
control
not.
it.
I did forget where's Candace Owens? Did I forget her? Whatever. All right, so this is the list. How we feeling? Netanyahu does not own, and this is why I didn't want to put him higher. And we're gonna have. I'm eventually come back and talk about this. Netanyahu is the president of Israel. Let me just be careful. Israel's only power is being America's attack dog. Prime Minister, thank you. Israel's in a position that they're in because they're America's attack dog. And
in the chat above, they said, well, president of the United States.
It bothers me that people don't, that this is something that people have lost in the last couple of years, is that the tail doesn't wag the dog. Our like modern neoliberal media apparatus, along with some of our leftist influencers and talkers, have really failed at making sure that people understand that Israel does not exist without America and Western interests. We are not Israel's attack dog. We are protecting our attack dog. They cannot do anything without us. And
yeah, I think that's a really great point. I do think the element of the Epstein files and showing how much influence Epstein had and his project for an ethnic Jewish supremacist state, just expanding that, and his blackmail over American leadership. We have yet to find out what that influence is, but it's true that Israel would not exist in the way that it does without American support. So a little bit of nuance.
Support them because they represent our interests in that region. And the fact that people have that backwards bothers me, because it does, it's not a short walk before you start getting into some weird ideologies. And there's a reason why Nick Fuentes is way up here now, and it's not just Destiny. But I'm saving that for another video. Just understand, the tail doesn't wag the dog. Thank you, Nona's favorite. I'm always thinking of that. We'll put it right here. But Nona's favorite, I'm always thinking of that video from Biden from the 70s and 80s where he's saying Israel is America's foothold in the Middle East. And if Israel did not exist, America should create it. That is a direct quote from Joe Biden.
I think it's about time we stop, those of us who support, as most of us do, Israel in this body, for apologizing for our support for Israel. There's no apology to be made. None. It is the best $3 billion investment we make. Were there not an Israel, the United States of America would have to invent an Israel to protect her interest in the region.
I need y'all to get that.
Wow.
We have.
He still is old there. He's been old. He has been in politics for fucking ever. But it is interesting to see him speak with some coherence, a little more enthusiasm. He isn't charisma
in terms of our critique as it pertains to
he isn't
issue.
charismatic.
And this is not to absolve Israel. I'm not absolving Israel.
He's never been charismatic.
What I'm saying is, when you're putting Israel in front of us as if we are not the entity that makes the Zionist entity possible. But I'm gonna save that for like an actual video, because it's become clear that we have lost the plot on that particular aspect of the conversation.
I saw that Little Bill, another creator, did a post on that, of how too many people in it can lead to more anti-Semitism, of people saying that like Israel controls the U.S. It's like AIPAC, these moneyed interests, these billionaires. It's not Jews. It's this corporate and private 1% greed and corruption that is controlling the US and Israel. Okay, so moving along, I saw this. Cardi B and the mayor announced 2K is coming to New York. This is a great pairing. I really hope they do a song together. This is just really going to show that Nicki could never, that like as Nicki is going further to the right, that Cardi B is like showing to be for the people. She still is part of this elite class of celebrities, so we have to acknowledge that. But I mean, let's take her. What are these comments? Okay. See? Cardi B is everything Nicki Minaj wishes she was. Cardi B, cardamom. See? I know what the people want. I cannot even put into words how much I love this channel. Mamdani is real. And this channel has existed. Mayor Adams and his administration, they were running this channel before and nobody watched it. And there were hardly any subscribers. I know this because I looked at it before the election. And they had just like a couple hundred views on videos. Look how much this has. 32,000.
Gosh, how are you?
I'm doing well. Like playing.
Can you believe that we got a 34-year-old mayor?
We do.
Like, I feel like I'm a kid, and you're like running New York.
I'm right there. Cardi, what do you think about free childcare?
I feel like free childcare is very important. Sometimes us women, we can't really go forward because we don't have nobody to help us take care of our kids.
This fall, we're starting to deliver universal 2K,
Yes.
which is just like pre-K, just like 3K, but 2K for 2-year-olds.
Yes.
Free childcare, 2,000 seats in the fall.
Wow.
And they're gonna be seats in the Bronx, starting it up. Shout out to the BX. And enrollment actually starts in June.
Wow.
And we had a question for you.
Yes.
We're gonna have a competition to create a jingle.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so New Yorkers are gonna submit their best jingle.
Oh, wow.
And we wanted to know if you would help judge that competition.
Oh, I will judge it for sure.
Cardi's gonna help you
Yes, I'm gonna help you.
by judging this competition.
No, the mayor's gonna help you. And I'm gonna judge, and he's the one with the fun. Yeah. Amen. Amen.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Iconic. I love that. This just goes to show how little political will there has been to actually work in behalf of the people. How truly bought and paid for our political system is, especially after the Citizens United case. This interview, just so I can get to some of these other things, as we're moving into Culture Corner, that was my segue of politics and culture. I don't know if I'm going to watch this whole thing. There was actually, I think there was a different video, and it's a little bit shorter too. I'm going to find that. Slayyyter's new album, Worst Girl in America, I enjoy. I don't like that there's a song about Chanel. I think Chanel, the entire brand, we need to boycott and acknowledge its Nazi affiliation in the past, and how most of these fashion brands are just classist overtly. That's how they sell things. And they also have deeply unethical practices with sourcing their materials. Okay. Oh, it was these two. Okay, I'm gonna watch this and then this. Okay, so we got that out of the way. All right. There are great songs on that album, though. I have to say, I really like the dance song. The crank song is fun. Actually kind of famous. I'm actually kind of famous. That really is for the girls, gays, and theys, which I love. It's definitely a party house album. Like, it's a rave album for sure.
Well, I do have to read one of your tweets, and I think it's a great tweet. You said, I am living proof that even the Cookie Monster pajama
Yeah.
Like I said, drawback to the It was crazy. Still in pajamas. I dressed like a schlep in high school. Pajamas, always in like, I just looked crazy. I was like, I got really into like stoner culture at a certain point. So
Yeah, so this whole album, it seems like it is her reflecting on her past. The previous album that she had, Erotic Electronic, is that what it was? Is that the name of the full album? No, it was Starfucker. That was the name of the album. And it had Erotic Electronic. It was also a single. It's a great song. That was about like being famous and like the glitz and glamour of LA. And this is going back to her hometown. And I really liked what is its name again? I just said it. Starfucker. I really like that album, but it does feel like this album is going back to her roots also musically, like with the music that she first started out with, like Daddy as Fuck, that song, that was one of her first songs.
oh yeah.
Yes.
Chaos.
Daddy issues.
First relationship you ever had, just like with like your mother and father's had kind of
Come here, Tiny.
carry that on through.
I'm gonna go let her in. Oh, I'm playing this and I'm not showing it.
And I
Whoops.
think in order to do that and like break the cycle, you really have to like self-work, look at your behaviors, look at what you do that's wrong, look at your like issues with like substances and maybe why you do that, or like I feel like I've been very very reflective on like who I am as a person lately and how to not be a victim of your past or things that have happened to you, because I think a lot of people will let traumatic experiences or traumatic events, I don't even like using the word victim. Like I'm no victim of anything. Like I think you can't let that like take over your life and be an excuse for like all of your behaviors and all of this and all of that. And I had it bad and blah, blah. Everyone has something. So it's like, I feel like I've really been trying lately to, dissect kind of, I guess, who I am as a person and reshape some behaviors that as an adult, gotta like cut it out with, I guess,
Do you find that? Do you find yourself seeking out guys who are like your dad?
I mean, I think I used to, not so much anymore, but I do think, I come from a very like long line of like alcoholics, and like my dad was like kind of a drug addict and like all this stuff. And I feel like in my adulthood, it's like your personality type, or like having ADHD, for example. He had it really bad. I have it really bad. I feel like sometimes like drinking becomes like a crutch, and I feel like his parents were like major alcoholics. They go through like a handle of Popov in like 3 days. He had like issues with drinking and, drug addiction. And so then when it gets down to like me or like my sister, it's like, if you're not like drinking like a normal person and you can't just have one drink, you need to be like, okay, I have the like addictive gene and like I need to like cut it out. And I still struggle with that. I was like sober for like almost a full calendar year a couple years ago. Now I kind of just try to like drink when it's like when I want to celebrate, but like I'm not like a have one drink kind of girl, or like have a glass of wine with dinner kind of girl. And it's like, it's funny, but it also is such a problem. And I think this album kind of like reads into that a little bit, you know? But yeah.
It's very real. I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah. You can't let the past like define your oh, sorry. I keep knocking this mic. I'm so sorry.
We're working on it.
But yeah, you can't let the past, I think, define your present or your future or like how you act. Like I see it a lot where I think people let even the word trauma like kind of makes me uncomfortable. People let it become such like their identity. I feel like it should be such a small percentage of who you are. Like you have to make something of yourself and like take that and use it as like motivation and fuel to be better, be not like your parents or be not like the things that, you know, you have felt like victimized by in a way. But like, I don't know. I feel like everyone just like likes to be depressed sometimes. I know I do, but like you gotta like get out of it at some point, you know, and not let it consume your world and consume your life. And
no, it can't define you.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's good to not let trauma define you, but sometimes like that's not a conscious thing for people, where like as you have access to resources, if you're in an upper class, you actually have the money to provide for your basic needs so that you can start healing rather than just being in the trauma. You can afford a therapist, you can go to the doctor. It's like those things also contribute. And when people are oppressed, which many of us are in capitalism, it is much harder to just like brush off trauma. Slayyyter doesn't like people using her religion to spread hate. Is she religious?
Still have Jesus tattooed on your arm?
I do. Mm-hmm.
Huh.
All of my tattoos are kind of like religious. It's like religious iconography. But yeah, I grew up super Catholic. I have a bit of a different relationship with Christianity or religion now, but I would say I'm kind of a religious person in ways, but I think that my approach to it is not from the same approach that maybe some people have. It's like kind of a personal one. I'm of the mindset where I'm like, I think God and Jesus love everybody, and that means everybody. I don't really like how people use religion to kind of spread hatefulness and hate speech and rules and this and that. I think people interpret the Bible really wrong. And I don't even really read the Bible like that, but I don't know. I feel like growing up Catholic, it's just something that feels very ingrained in my life and my family. And, you know, I went to like Catholic school in St. Louis for like grade school and then switched to public high school. So it's like growing up, we would go to church. Like Catholic school is a huge thing in St. Louis, by the way. It's like very culturally, like my family didn't have a lot of money, so like we would go and like the like priest, like pastor of the school of the parish or whatever, kind of like let us go for free because we didn't have money, and like my parents wanted us to get like a religious education. And I feel like in St. Louis, like it's like what school, what high school, what Catholic school did you go to? It's all very expensive. People spend so much on tuition just to go to these like all boys or all girls private high schools. But then I went to public high school. But yeah, I feel like I kept the religion somewhere inside me for, you know, till now.
That's cool.
I just really over-explained that. Sorry.
No, I like that. I very much relate. I
Yeah.
also went to a Catholic school up until high school.
Yeah.
And it was a very big deal. It was very expensive.
Very expensive. And the switch, like the culture shift from private to public.
Oh, I
Did
knew
you
nobody.
have that?
My whole school was about 80 people. You could literally stand on one side of you could stand at the eighth grade classroom and look down and see the entire school. It was one hallway and then a gym at the end.
And this is 8th grade, like your middle school?
That was my
Your high
elementary to
Oh.
middle school, including preschool. I was there for most of my life. And then I went to a high school with like 2,000 kids.
Yeah, that was like my exact, yes.
It was
My
very
grade
scary.
school was very small. Probably had like 30 kids in my 30 or 40 kids in my full 8th grade class, to then like a big public high school, like Kirkwood High School in St. Louis.
Interesting. Okay. I didn't know that she was still religious. This is longer. I don't know if we have time for this. Please watch Bait. Bait the show. It's very good. I'm going to save this for next week because I'm guessing as well they will get into some politics. Okay. Let's watch this. Tinashe performing Small Reminders. This song is so good. Profound, creative, original. Oh, I didn't get the words right. This is it. Those are really cool sunglasses. Great vocalist. Such a creative songwriter. Do I have that necklace? Of the bassist? Nope, it's a V. Never mind.
What do you dream about? When no one else is there to listen. What do you wish for? What do you care about? There's so much weight all on your shoulders. You secretly carry around. When you look in the mirror, you're proud. When you think about your mistakes, don't make a sound. Who are you really though? When no one can convince you different.
Do you even know?
If you could undo what you're going through, would you?
All right, that's Tinashe. A very underrated song, in my opinion. Okay, moving along. This was recommended by a chatter. Aliana. Shout out to you. Let's give this a listen. This is my first time hearing this.
One foot first, I gotta eat first. Power gon' break me from generational curse. Work check to check, but my hunger won't curve. Drop hit after hit to one, like Kirk. Ancestors back in 32 paved the dirt. Native land bodies buried deep in the earth. In the story, everybody bound to get burned. Even in cells that wanna put me on a shirt. We all.
The looks are great.
Look, I seen all the evil, you could never heal it. Historically repeated, try to counter steer it. Same white clan colonizing brown land. His Uncle Sam confiscating checks like contraband. Yeah, we all tired, yes, we all tried. Village to villages to build our empires. Everybody gotta make some sacrifices. The blood on our hands, that's
I love that, smoking a joint while you're running. Beers.
From the hills to the ghetto. I'ma let the dog out the kennel.
Ooh.
Heat rising up.
That pause, I mean, this makeup is major. I love the key. Oh my god.
Like the kettle, we all wanna change things. But if they start me out, I'ma have to go full pedal. Nobody's safe in a gated residential.
Now tell me what you want, what you really want. Freedom to, freedom from, free from all the above. What would you do for it? Would you shoot for it? Would you demonize people in the news for it? Wanna run the country, but you won't loot a shoe store? Froggy ass bitches get it boiled, thinking it's lukewarm. We all want the same things, my enemy might want it more. We ain't got nothing to lose, their world was built for them. It's an extinction burst. They know that time is running out, so who gon' get there first? We all born with bloodlust, so who gon' quench the thirst? You want your hands free from dirt, who gon' heal the earth? Revolution rooted in love. I'll shoot my way to God. Revolution rooted in love of everything I'm not. Revolution rooted in love. Is this evolution of us or just another swing back of almighty pendulum?
We all want the same things. From the hills to the ghettos. I'ma let the dog out the kennel. Heat rising up like a kettle. We all wanna change things. But if they start me out,
Ooh,
I'ma have to
that
go
change in
full
the
pedal.
beat.
Nobody's safe in a gated residential. I want the same thing. From the hills to the ghettos, I'ma let the dog out the kennel.
The lyrics are great.
But if they start me out, I'ma have to go full pedal. Nobody's safe in a gated residential.
What do you see as the meaning of the term revolutionary?
The revolutionary wants to change the nature of society in a way to promote a world where the needs and interests of the people.
Very cool. I like that. Good recommendation. All right. Let's move to 7 causes of the French Revolution. We'll see what this video is like. I haven't watched it. I am not familiar with History Hit, the entity creating this, so we'll see what it's like. And then after this, we'll get into the reading.
France was the powerhouse of Europe. It had the continent's biggest population, a large
it's gonna do
empire,
the refresh
and had
thing.
become the hub of the Enlightenment. But the country was to be transformed and engulfed.
I'm gonna refresh it before it has a chance to time out because I'm not seeing the captions.
In 1789, France was the powerhouse of Europe. It had
There
the
we go.
continent's biggest population,
Got ahead of
a
it that
large
time.
overseas empire, and had become the hub of the Enlightenment. But the country was to be transformed and engulfed by a fierce revolution. A 10-year struggle of profound social and political upheaval that would have a lasting impact on the world. It would create shockwaves that traversed the globe, ending the Bourbon monarchy and sending shivers down the spine of kings and queens in Europe. Though it degenerated into a bloodbath during the Reign of Terror, the French Revolution helped to shape modern democracies by exposing the power inherent in the will of the people.
Okay.
Many of its values, liberté, égalité, fraternité, are still used
Sounds
as a
like
motto today.
a promising video.
So how did this monumental series of events come about? How did they escalate into the scenes that we conjure up today? Who were the key influential figures? In this video, we're going to cover the causes of the French Revolution, exploring how economic hardships, political injustices, and cultural shifts converged to ignite one of the most seismic uprisings in history. France's financial situation in the late 18th century was dire, and a number of ill-advised financial manoeuvres only worsened problems for the cash-strapped Ancien regime. France's leading role against Britain in the 7 Years' War of 1756 to 1763 had drained its treasury, as did support of the American Revolution of 1775 to 1782.
And they were pissed
France
that the
also
Americans
had a
didn't help with the
significant
revolution.
global empire,
As they should be.
But too much focus on its overseas possessions meant the struggles of
It
the
just
French
looked
people
too
had been
violent.
neglected. In order to protect its colonies and provide proper support to the American revolutionaries, the government had a sizable army and navy to maintain, which was an enormous expenditure against its tax receipts. Now, one can never underestimate the role that bread, or rather a lack of bread, played in the lead up to the revolution. Whether the country was in the midst of an economic...
Yeah, so people are starving. People are starving, and this is something that we must keep in perspective. It is imperative we keep it in perspective while reading the Scarlet Pimpernel, this aristocratic propaganda that Baroness Orczy is going to try and humanize and provide sympathy for the ruling class, which it's like there still is like some suffering, they're still human beings, but also at the same time, like there is a reason why the masses were so angry.
crisis or boom, if bread was available, then the people would rarely have cause for revolt. As the famous French philosopher Voltaire once said, the Parisians only required the comic opera and white bread. Meanwhile, a famous quote
Entertainment and food.
to many
That's what they
different
said.
historians and
That's what they said in Greece to keep the masses pacified. Food and entertainment, the Colosseum. And it's not an accident when we have these empires that are the center of culture and entertainment. That is intentional. It is to keep us subdued so that we don't rise up.
personalities is there are only 9 meals between mankind and the revolution. It was the monarch's job as le premier boulanger du royaume, first baker of the kingdom, to ensure the food supply of his subjects. But the king had been counselled by physiocrats, a group of economists who believed that the wealth of nations was created through land development and that agricultural products should be highly priced. Under their counsel, the crown had tried intermittently to deregulate the domestic grain trade and introduce a form of free trade. In late April and May 1775, food shortages and high prices ignited popular anger in the towns and villages of the Parisian basin. Over 300 riots and attacks on grain stores were recorded in little over 3 weeks. The wave of popular protest became known as the Flower War. Protesting crowds formed at the gates of Versailles before rioting broke out in Paris and spread to the countryside. A disastrous harvest in 1788 caused by heavy rain and a blisteringly hot summer brought about skyrocketing bread prices and famine. The French population had also grown dramatically in the 18th century. There were 5 to 6 million more people in France in 1789 than in 1720, but no corresponding increase in native grain production. The demand for bread now simply outweighed the supply. For the average peasant, bread was the staple food, accounting for 60 to 80% of the budget of a wage earner's family. Even a small rise in grain prices could spark tensions. While people lower
Something
down the
that'll actually
social
make
order
you feel
were struggling
full.
to put food on the table,
Bread.
the mammoth costs associated with the upkeep of King Louis XVI's extravagant palace at Versailles and the frivolous spending of the Queen Marie Antoinette did little to relieve the growing debt.
And this was happening well before Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette, that they were on this trajectory with like the building of Versailles by Louis XIV. So it just came to a head at this point, and we just happen to have even more selfish and incompetent rulers during this time.
Whether they chose to turn a blind eye or were simply ignorant of the dire situation of the masses, the gluttonous and excessive manner in which members of the French court lived their lives aggravated tensions between those in power and those who weren't. Let them eat cake. More on that later. Decades of economic irresponsibility was a key cause of the French Revolution. A series of costly wars, mismanagement of the agricultural economy, and its aristocracy's extravagant spending made the monarchy appear out of touch with its subjects.
Appear?
Let's talk about the estates.
It just was. I mean, they just were out of touch.
This division of the French population into
That's
three
just the
distinct
situation.
social classes. The first
Intentionally
being the clergy,
insulated
the second
from the
nobility,
populace.
and the third, the commoners, was a hangover from the medieval era. Let's break this down. The highest estate, the first estate, contained members of the Roman Catholic clergy. These included bishops, priests, and nuns, among other religious figures in the country. Only about 0.5% of the population was part of this first estate. The second estate consisted of the nobles, often high-ranking members of the government, or even family members of Louis XVI, who represented about 2% of the population. Members of this second estate also owned approximately 20% of the land, which was another symbol of wealth and status in France. Now, neither the first or second estate members paid any tax, yet judging by the extravagant spending of those in Versailles, they squandered the taxes provided to them. The third estate comprised almost 98% of the population. Peasants, labourers, merchants or land workers who were toiling away on the lands of the nobles. The commoners, as they were
The
known,
engine that
worked
makes
hard
it run,
and yet held
they were the
least
labour.
power and bore the heaviest tax burdens. Are you starting
Sounds
to see
familiar.
how this wasn't perhaps the most stable system? I should also add that in this period, with growing industrialisation, came an emerging urban middle class, in between the peasantry and the aristocracy. The capitalist bourgeoisie, which resented exclusion from political power and positions of honour. This class of people, along with the peasantry, would be instrumental in overthrowing the feudal aristocracy in order to remake society according to capitalist interests and values. The Estates Generale, a general assembly
Which isn't great.
representing the French estates of the realm, had not met since
It was not about
1614.
distributing the wealth.
And when it did finally convene in 1789, with King Louis XVI wanting to address the growing financial crisis that France found itself in, the voting was structured so that the two privileged estates could outvote the third estate. Fed up with the Estates Generale's inequalities, the third estate broke away and formed the National Assembly, an assembly not of an estate, but of the people. It became the effective government of France. Over the next couple of years, it suspended the old judicial system, declared the property of the church to be at the disposal of the nation, published a Declaration of Rights for Man and of the Citizen, and forced King Louis XVI to sign a constitution that meant France would now function as a constitutional monarchy. What is a constitutional monarchy, I hear you ask? Well, it's a system of government where the king or queen remains the head of state, but without direct authoritarian power. Instead, political power is delegated to Parliament. This system exists today
I just
in the
finished
United
this
Kingdom,
bracelet.
Denmark and Thailand,
I used
amongst
it
other
with
countries.
the rest of the
An
stream
absolute
for
monarchy,
my
on
green
the other hand,
monochrome
is where the
bracelet.
monarch maintains direct power over their subjects, such as in Tsarist Russia. Nearly a century and a half after the French Revolution, this Russian Tsarist regime would also be ousted by its people. In the 18th century, ideas of liberty, reason, and religious tolerance traversed Europe, creating social upheaval, revolution and change. The Enlightenment, or Age of Reason as it became known, would see a philosophical questioning of dogmatic religious institutions, social systems and long-established monarchies. Many of the Enlightenment's most influential figures lived in France. Philosophers like Voltaire, Rousseau and Montesquieu criticised the existing social order and wrote that people had natural rights and that rational reforms could create better societies. In an age where literacy levels were increasing and printing was cheap, these ideas spread across the continent. The rational strength of Enlightenment arguments provided revolutionaries with intellectual ammunition against the established order. The French monarchy didn't help itself. With its divine ordination now coming under serious scrutiny, the royals were seemingly incapable of adapting to the political and societal pressures that were being exerted on them. And with ongoing reports of the distasteful and insulting squandering of taxpayer money within Versailles, the gun was now fully loaded. As with the Enlightenment movement, there was not a unified, coherent ideology underpinning the French Revolution. There were the devout followers of Rousseau, like Robespierre and Saint-Just, who declared bluntly that every political edict which is not based upon nature is wrong. Then there were those more radical and brutal, like Danton and Condorcet, who believed their political aims could be achieved through the massacre of as many of one's
The captions had
opponents as
no
possible.
idea what he said.
With these wildly differing views, the revolution would later degenerate into ruinous struggles during a period known as the Terror. The bloodshed led Madame Roland to cry famously in despair, "Liberty, what crimes are committed in your name?" Yet even in the darkest hour of the Terror, the revolutionaries were able to turn to the Enlightenment thinkers to justify their actions. For example, Voltaire once declared that governments need both shepherds and butchers, and from this, skilled orators like Robespierre were able to convince the people that terror is nothing but prompt, severe, inflexible justice. It is therefore an emanation of virtue. The leaders of the revolution shaped Enlightenment philosophy to their own ends, at times misinterpreting and obfuscating the original message. But despite these contradictions, the long-lasting revolutionary motto of liberté, égalité, fraternité against hereditary power and its dogma can be seen as a reflection of Enlightenment ideas. Thanks to growing literacy and availability of newspapers and pamphlets in late 18th century France, Enlightenment ideas could spread more widely. The press created a new culture of dialogue and debate. All values, norms and institutions were re-evaluated and discussed by the public that had become aware of the power of reason. This isn't to say that people were influenced directly by everything they saw. They accepted some ideas and rejected others. They interpreted things in their own way. Print did not directly necessarily shape their minds, but it did open up the possibility of thinking differently. And most came to the conclusion that a corrupt and tyrannical monarchy that allowed no representation of the working people was not for them. Rapid urbanisation also meant that people were now living in close quarters in cities, facilitating the spread of ideas and discontent. During the later decades of the 18th century, French industrial production had grown rapidly, and throughout the country, the demand rose for urban manufactured goods, attracting significant capital and a drove of labourers to the cities. A far larger percentage of French people now lived in cities like Paris, which boasted roughly 650,000 inhabitants. It was in these cities that writers found their public. By 1789, all restrictions on the press were eliminated, and by 1793, over 400 newspapers had been founded, including 150 in Paris alone. Whether they were eulogies, political denunciations, scholarly and philosophical essays, or satirical cartoons poking fun at the monarchy, mainly Marie Antoinette, the French public now had access to the ideas of the revolutionaries and a platform in which to criticise those in power. Also, fun fact, there's absolutely no evidence that Queen Marie Antoinette ever said, "let them eat cake," whilst the working classes struggled to afford a loaf of bread. The phrase can actually be traced back to the writings of Jean-Jacques Rousseau in his Confessions in 1765, who attributed it to a great princess. But this was 24 years prior to the French Revolution, when Antoinette was 9 years old and had never been to France. A very early instance
that little
of fake
birthday
news,
cake photoshopped in.
The American overthrow of their British colonial overlords in 1783, having declared their independence, was a catalyst for similar events across the Atlantic. When the War of Independence first broke out in 1775, the French chose to avoid any participation. They had been engaged in periodic wars with Great Britain for almost a century, but hesitated in endorsing rebellious colonies. Nonetheless, motivated by their desire to undermine Britain, France provided the necessary support that made American victory a possibility. This support came in many forms: covert supply of war material, diplomatic support in Europe, and eventually a full-fledged military alliance. All of this, you guessed it, cost the French government money. A lot of money. Money that by the early years of the 1780s, the Treasury simply did not have. Didn't stop the royal spending though. The conscription of soldiers, the maintenance of armies, and continued naval investment all took its toll on the French finances. Despite this, they continued their support of the revolutionaries and played an absolutely vital role in Washington's eventual victory. But that a republican nation could be created for the people, by the people, undermined the French monarchy's position. Not only did the American Revolution offer a practical demonstration of Enlightenment ideals in action, but it also showed that a determined population could overthrow an established order. Moreover, French soldiers who returned from America brought with them revolutionary ideas, further stirring the pot in France. Under the Ancien Regime, which means old order, France was an absolute monarchy, with the king having almost unchecked power. Louis XIV's reign, a century before the revolution, marked the zenith of the French monarchy's
Do you see how queer
power.
these people are? The tights, the high heels, the wigs, the showing of the legs. Just be honest about it. Just be honest.
He controlled the nobility by hosting them at the extravagant palace of Versailles and engaging them in strict court rituals. For many decades, the magnificence of Versailles had been a source of pride for the French. A Parisian bourgeois says in all seriousness to an Englishman, "What is your king? He is badly lodged, to be pitied in fact," the writer Louis Sebastian Mercier wrote. "Look at ours, he lives at Versailles." It's true that Versailles was seen as a glorious symbol of the absolute monarch, of France's divinely ordained royal family and of the state itself. But well before the French Revolution, some were warning that the grandeur and excesses of Versailles were terrible for public relations. From the start, everything was over the top at Versailles. Louis XIV, known as the Sun King, was the vainest man ever, the royal responsible for turning what had once been a small royal
Versailles?
hunting lodge into the most extravagant court that Europe had ever known. Entrusting Europe's master architects, designers and craftsmen with what he termed his glory, he spent a huge amount of taxpayers' money on more than 2,000 palatial rooms, elaborate gardens, and a vast private zoo. Concerts, multi-course banquets, balls or parades packed the calendar.
That picture that showed Ben Franklin.
An enormous amount of money was spent on everything from the costumes
Benjamin
to the
Franklin?
set. While most of France lived in poverty,
I know
fortunes
him.
were made
We're on
and
a
lost at Versailles
nickname
on a
basis.
nightly basis. Bribery was common, as were graft and embezzlement. The royal stables were often a target of corruption. In 1775, one noble was accused of taking 120 of the king's horses for his own personal use. Louis XVI had a chance to reform the political and tax system, but the longer he chose opulence over the pragmatic amendment of the French state, the more the monarchy was seen as ineffectual and out of touch. The monarch's inability to implement reforms and its dismissiveness towards the needs and demands of the populace further eroded its legitimacy. Key events leading up to 1789 were catalysts for the bloody revolution that would follow. Whilst the breakaway of the Third Estate from the National Assembly had signalled the end of absolute monarchy in France, the French population was now starting to take action of its own accord. Violent protests were now raging across the French capital, especially after King Louis XVI's dismissal of Jacques Necker, a popular and reform-minded finance minister. Many Parisians saw this as a sign that the king was attempting to suppress the assembly and the revolutionary movement. The presence of a large number of troops, including foreign mercenaries, in and around Versailles had also raised suspicions amongst supporters of the assembly who feared that the king might use force to dissolve it and suppress the revolution. It was time to take action. On the 14th of July 1789, a large crowd gathered outside of the Bastille, a symbol of royal authority and tyranny. They demanded the surrender and weapons and gunpowder stored in the fortress. When their demand was refused and negotiations broke down, the crowd stormed the Bastille. The ensuing battle resulted in the deaths of many protesters and only one defender. Eventually, the Bastille's commander would surrender.
The captions are egregious
but he
with
and
the
his
French
officers
words.
were killed by the mob. In response to the storming of the Bastille, King Louis XVI finally made some concessions. He recalled Necker, moved troops away from Paris, and embraced some revolution.
What am I looking at? Why is he wearing this hat?
Symbols to appease the people. But
The
news
upper
of
class
Bastille's fall
are
and the growing
very
revolution
inbred.
further led to uprisings across the country as peasants now attacked their noble landlords. The balance of power had shifted.
I learned this the other day. It was from a Majority Report video. Who did they have on? Her last name's Crabapple. She was talking about a book about the Jewish Bund and Zionism in Russia and Poland. And she was saying that apparently the Russian monarchs were so inbred that their blood stopped clotting. That's a thing? I mean, I know people can have that as a condition, but I didn't know that was a thing because of incest. Crazy.
Nobility feared for their safety.
It's almost as if nature's
the
like,
of the Bastille served as a symbol of
don't
the
do
people's
that.
resistance against
Don't
the
do
monarchy.
that.
It marked the start of a period of intense revolutionary activity and social upheaval that would soon see the king and many of those closest to him lose their heads and lead to significant changes in the country's political and social structure. The French Revolution was not the result of a single cause, but rather a convergence of several factors. Economic hardships, coupled with deep-seated social inequalities and the spread of Enlightenment ideas, created a volatile environment. Political mismanagement and immediate events acted as catalysts, pushing France into a decade of revolution. The outcomes were the abolition of the monarchy, the rise of radical political factions, and a series of events that would change the face of Europe forever. Emerging from the chaos was one man, a military commander, who, through a series of fortunate events, would rise to the top, establishing a dictatorship as Emperor of France. His name was Napoleon Bonaparte.
oh, it's showing the newest
In
movie.
the years leading up to his eventual
I was so annoyed when that movie came out. The one with Joaquin Phoenix that it's just showing. I was like, we've already seen so much about Napoleon Bonaparte. He's had so much screen time. He's taken up so much attention in history. Why do we need to focus on him again?
Coup in 1799.
How about we tell
France was in
stories
a
of the
state
working
of
class?
Political turmoil. The revolution had unleashed waves of radicalism, and the government had shifted between different forms, from monarchy to republic to radical revolutionary regimes. By 1799, the Directory, a new 5-member executive body which had replaced the National Assembly after the infamous Reign of Terror, was beset by corruption, economic instability, and military failures. France was exhausted, and many saw the need for a strong leader to stabilise the nation. Napoleon, a military general with a rising reputation, seized
I'll be
this
right back.
opportunity.
I need to
He had
step out
earned
for a sec.
fame and respect through his military successes in Italy and Egypt, and was admired by many for his charisma and strategic brilliance. With a group of like-minded officers and politicians, including Emmanuel Sieyès and Roger Ducos, Napoleon began plotting the overthrow of the Directory. The coup d'etat itself unfolded in 2 stages. On the morning of the 9th of November 1799, Napoleon, in command of troops, occupied key points in Paris, effectively surrounding the government. He then convened the Council of Ancients, one of the 2 legislative bodies, and delivered a speech emphasising the need for a strong government. The council voted to move the government to the Château de Saint-Cloud, effectively dismantling the Directory. Meanwhile, Sieyès and Ducos, both members of the Directory, resigned their positions, leaving the government in a state of utter confusion. The other legislative body, the Council of 500, resisted the coup and attempted to maintain their authority. This led to a tense standoff between Napoleon's troops and the council, with both sides vying for control. The turning point came when Napoleon, facing hostility in the Council of 500, entered the chamber dramatically with his troops. In a scene often depicted in history books, he faced down angry deputies and declared, "Citizens, I am here by the will of the people, and I will leave only at the point of a bayonet." This bold move intimidated the opposition, and the Council of 500 disbanded. With the collapse of the Directory and the neutralisation of the legislative bodies, a power vacuum emerged. To fill this void, a new government was established, known as the Consulate. Napoleon, Sieyès and Ducos were appointed as the 3 consuls, with Napoleon serving as first consul, effectively making him the most powerful figure in France. While the more stable and authoritarian regime was presented as a return to order and a defence of the principles of the revolution, it effectively marked the beginning of Napoleon's rule and the consolidation of his power. Over the next few years, Napoleon would further solidify his authority, eventually declaring himself emperor in 1804. Napoleon's coup d'etat of 1799 was a pivotal moment in French history, representing the transition from the revolutionary chaos of the late 18th century to the era of Napoleonic rule, which would have a profound impact on Europe for years to come.
Thanks for watching this video on the History Hit YouTube channel. You can subscribe right here to make sure you don't miss any of our great films that are coming out. Or if you are a true history fan, check out our special dedicated history channel, historyhit.tv. You're going to love it.
I enjoyed that. I thought they had a realistic, even-handed portrayal of what the French Revolution was about, not favoring the aristocracy as much. Unfortunately, this does, but that's why we're reading it as a cautionary tale that the upper class, they really don't care about the rest of us for the most part. There are some that do. There are some class traitors, but that's why we have to organize and Protect our own. Shall we read? Oh, that's cute. Look, my gloves match my hat today. Okay. So we are still in the introduction for the Scarlet Pimpernel. It is very lengthy, as many of these introductions for what many people consider classic literature, they're very long. The academics that write these introductions really go in. And I mean, it is a flex, I guess, to be like, yeah, I wrote the introduction for the latest publication. But also, like, if you're going to be an apologist for aristocracy, is it that helpful? Anyway, we're going to continue reading it. All right. Where did I end? Okay. The Scarlet Pimpernel was not simply born a legend. Like most superheroes, he had to overcome adversity. Bereft of family, he could count only on himself. And like many heroes... Okay, I know I just started reading, but I'm going to have to interrupt immediately. You know, it's harder to not have family when you're poor, when you're broke, when you're oppressed, as opposed to being rich and not having family. So, let's qualify that. Bereft of family, he could count only on himself. And like many heroes, he relies on disguise. At the beginning of the novel, he dresses up as a horrible witch driving a cart. A witch? Whatever that means. In this interpretation of it, I doubt it's like actual witches. Horrible witch driving a cart, whose whip is adorned by locks of hair in all colors. They come, she claims, from the heads of fresh victims of the guillotine. Honestly, that's kind of fierce. It is a nice touch. In his next disguise, perhaps he could be a Republican guard, a sans-culotte, a tricoteuse. Who can tell? This taste for disguise underscores the fact that the Scarlet Pimpernel is something of a freak. Oh, he's freaky, all right. Yeah, why don't you just say queer? That sounds very queer. If we're going to be doing dress up, he's doing drag. He's dressing up as a woman. Okay. He lives a double life, and no one except his clique knows of his secret, the difference between his hidden identity and his public, social one. Like many superheroes, he must lead his daily life regretting that his qualities go unrecognized. A situation even more exasperating in those encounters where ladies swoon after the Scarlet Pimpernel, but consider him to be insignificant. Okay. You still have a ton of wealth. And apparently, according to this book, Marguerite is super hot. So, what do you have to complain about? The character's genealogy would not be complete if we did not mention two figures usually associated with him. Different, yet both bearing a kinship to the Scarlet Pimpernel. The first is Zorro, who the American Johnston McCulley created for Pulp Fiction magazines in 1919. Zorro also leads a double life, and was in fact somewhat inspired by his British counterpart. Like the Scarlet Pimpernel, Zorro is of noble descent, and his social persona is a far cry from his secret activities. He is a true dandy. Same. That's one of the reasons why the dandyism of the Scarlet Pimpernel, because Sir Percy is very much a dandy, that is a huge appeal to me. So I'm going to lean in with my Sir Percy portrayal, just so you're aware. You've been warned. it's going to be hella queer. Which I think it needs. It lends itself to that. He is a true dandy, and this taste for elegance masks his real identity. The second character is Her Majesty's secret agent, James Bond. Ugh. I don't care. I don't care about James Bond. I don't care if you hate me for that. It's not that interesting to me. Sorry. Linking Bond, which the show Bait that I was talking about earlier is addressing this, the colonizer mentality that is involved with James Bond. Linking Bond to the Scarlet Pimpernel is trickier, but some critics have convincingly argued that the Pimpernel's actions, enabling citizens to escape secretly from a sovereign country, is equivalent to espionage. Like 007, the Scarlet Pimpernel is an Englishman, a gentleman, and faithful to so-called English values, whatever that means. Colonization. Pimpernel also resembles his dandy descendant in that he is impeccably dressed. See why he's queer? Even in the most perilous situations. The fuss and bother of virile action is never an excuse to look less than unruffled. In one scene in which the Scarlet Pimpernel runs the greatest of dangers, he is described as absolutely perfect in his attire. Excerpt. He wore a magnificent coat and riding suit. As usual, his getup was absolutely irreproachable. The fine Mechlin lace at his neck and wrists was immaculate in its gossamer daintiness. His hands looked slender and white. Colonizer. His fair hair, colonizer, was carefully brushed. In fact, at this moment, he might have been on his way to a garden party at the Prince of Wales instead of deliberately, cold-bloodedly running his head in a trap set for him by his deadliest enemy. End of excerpt. But the similarities with 007 stop here. Whereas each is a British hero gentleman who never loses his cool, the Pimpernel is a free agent and a leader. He also is not working for the government. Although he might as well be. Although he loves England and is a faithful subject of the king, he does not represent the crown of England. A third figure is close to the Scarlet Pimpernel on an essential level and helps illuminate his traits. This is the escapist from novelist Michael Chabon's fictional account of the birth of comics in 1940s New York, The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay. I haven't heard about this. Interesting. Chabon's heroes, two young Jewish boys, imagine a comic hero whose mission will be to liberate the oppressed and to devote his life to the possibility of escape. Like all superheroes, the escapist's beginnings are inscribed in a mythical Genesis, but his most important symbol is the golden key that adorns his chest. The symbol that nullifies the very meaning of prison. Joseph Cavalier, one of the creators of The Escapist, had fled from Prague on the eve of World War II, making this theme of escape more complex. So this is different because it said they are for what? To liberate the oppressed? That's not what the Scarlet Pimpernel is doing. He's saving the ruling class. Just so we're clear. Joseph is a concrete product of escapist fantasies, and the form of his own escape is as fantastic as anything in fiction. To leave Prague, he hides in the coffin of the famous Golem, a statue that must be shipped away by a secret society in order to protect it from the Nazis. Also, this is very dissimilar when we have Baroness Orsi, the author who was a fascist sympathizer at the beginning of the Nazi regime. Hello. The escapist, like the Scarlet Pimpernel, devotes his life to freeing all who are prisoners, oppressed or powerless. That's not what the Scarlet Pimpernel does. He doesn't free all prisoners who are oppressed or powerless. He's just the upper class. But the escapist eponymizes the fantasy itself, namely escapism, obviously, which seeks to do in fiction what could not be done in fact. Cavalier and Clay dream of accomplishing through comics what history cannot accomplish at the time: beat Adolf Hitler. Comic books perhaps alone can offer such a fantasy of stalking history's ultimate villain in a colorful panel. Well, the ultimate villains we're adding to this collection of disgusting people in the modern day. Comic books, perhaps, alone can offer such a fantasy as Sawking's history's ultimate villain in a colorful panel, with the attending biff and pow exploding around a hero's punch. Impossibly, easy resolutions, that's onomatopoeia. Impossibly, easy resolutions such as this are legion in the comic book genre, which has led critics to decry the form as mere escapism. Chabon turns this pejorative label on its head by making the escapist's heroic work the literal action of escape, both of himself and of those he saves. In this way, the freedom granted by costumed heroes mimics the freedom found by reading fiction, which can be called an escapist activity, no matter how highbrow the content. True. I am interested in reading that. The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay. That sounds good. Way more class conscious and for the masses than this. In Cavalier and Clay, Joseph hopes to spread the freedom he himself has won by inventing a literature that can be consumed en masse. En masse. But if we're being true to being American, en masse. En masse. By making it his business to save others and to publish his deeds in his flower-bearing letters, the Scarlet Pimpernel too seeks to repay his debt of freedom. Okay. Turning now to the Scarlet Pimpernel, not so much from perspective of an anti-revolutionary series, but from that of escapism, there is an additional angle to the hero. He is not so much an avenger as he is a savior in that he enables an escape to take place. In this regard, in the Scarlet Pimpernel, material matters far less in the end than the timeless gesture made by our hero, the grand gesture of liberation for a few of the ruling class. And this gesture, repeated over and over again in these magical episodes of prisoners freed from their captors, leads us straight to the essence of literary fiction's tout court. For what is literature but an invitation to take flight along with the characters, to escape with them from our world into theirs? Doubtless, the adventure novel or the comic book does this with a sometimes facile efficiency, but we nonetheless may admire the power of such an invitation to the imagination. Clearly, Baroness Orsi may have found in her work a consolation, a means for escapism, faced with the tribulations of her own life history as it intersected with the grand and turbulent events of history at the beginning of the 20th century. Like suppressing the working class. We readers may derive some other effect, sheer escapist enjoyment rather than consolation, but the great popularity of the novel means that we still attest to the enduring power of a great work of literary fiction. And that's the end. This is the academic who wrote the introduction. Sarah Juliette Sasson is a lecturer in the Department of French and Romance Philology at Columbia University, and is so many academics that they get to write introductions are from Columbia. It's probably because there's so many publishing companies in New York. And is the managing editor of the Romantic Review, a journal devoted to romance literatures. She holds a PhD in comparative literature from Columbia. She specializes in 19th century literature and particularly in the novel. She has published essays on Honoré de Balzac, Heinrich N., and on social mobility in the 19th century literature. Currently, she is working on a book on Balzac. Balzac? That's me being immature. Okay, introduction done. Let's get into the body of it. Chapter 1. Okay. Paris, September 1792. A surging, seething, murmuring crowd of beings that are human only in name, for to eye and ear they seem naught but savage creatures, animated by vile passions, by the lust of vengeance and of hate. Again, the dehumanization of the commoners, just everyday people. The hour, some little time before sunset, and the place, the West Barricade, at the very spot where, footnote, probably the Neuilly Barricade. A decade later, a proud tyrant raised an undying monument to the nation's glory and his own vanity, meaning Napoleon. During the greater part of the day, the guillotine had been kept busy at its ghastly work. Cool. All that France had boasted of in the past centuries, of ancient names and blue blood, had paid toll to her desire for liberty and for fraternity. Yeah, liberté, égalité, fraternité. The carnage had only ceased at this late hour of the day because there were other, more interesting sights for the people to witness, a little while before the closing of the barricades for the night. And so the crowd rushed away from the Place de Grève, colloquialism for... Oh, wait, no. This is a footnote. A different footnote. Endnotes. Called the Place de l'Hôtel de Ville since 1830, this public square was famous as a rallying point of many popular revolutions. Initially part of a series of piers along the Seine in the 12th century, it eventually grew into a busy marketplace. During the Revolution, the Place de Grève was the site of many executions. Cool. I mean, depending on who it is. If it's the nobles, I don't care as much. Sorry. And so the crowd rushed away from the Place de Grève and made for the various barricades in order to watch this interesting and amusing sight. It was to be seen every day, for those aristos, colloquialism for aristocrats, that's the footnote, were such fools. They were traitors to the people, of course, all of them, men, women, and children, who happened to be descendants of the great men who, since the Crusades, had made the glory of France. Okay, that framing of like, oh, they only did they only had made the mistake of bringing glory to France. Okay. Her old noblesse. Their ancestors had oppressed the people, well, had crushed them under the scarlet heels of their dainty buckled shoes, and now the people had become the rulers of France and crushed their former masters. Not beneath their heels, for they went shoeless mostly in these days, but beneath a more effectual weight, the knife of the guillotine. It's me doing this. And daily, hourly, the hideous instrument of torture claimed its many victims. I wouldn't say it's torture, because it's killing them. Unless you're counting when it doesn't actually kill someone, that's torture. Old men, young women, tiny children, even until the day when it would finally demand the head of a king and of a beautiful young queen. But this was as it should be. Were not the people now the rulers of France? Every aristocrat was a traitor, as his ancestors had been before him. For 200 years now the people had sweated and toiled and starved. Hello, not something Baroness Orsi would know about. To keep a lustful court in lavish extravagance. Now the descendants of those who had helped make those courts brilliant had to hide for their lives, to fly, if they wished to avoid the tardy vengeance of the people. And they did try to hide, and tried to fly. That was just the fun of the whole thing. Every afternoon before the gates closed and the market carts went out in procession by the various barricades, some fool of an aristo endeavored to evade the clutches of the Committee of Public Safety. In various disguises, under various pretexts, they tried to slip through the barriers which were so well guarded by citizen soldiers of the Republic. Men in women's clothes. Okay. We're getting some queerness from the working class. Tell me again why we should be scared or hating these people. They tried to... Oh, wait. In various disguises, under various pretexts, they tried to slip through the... Oh, wait, I already read that. Men in women's clothes, women in male attire. Ooh. Children disguised in beggars' rags. There were some of all sorts. Ci-devant counts. Footnote, common citizens would refer to an aristocrat as a ci-devant, a way of avoiding having to refer to him or her as a citizen. Ci-devant means more or less you there. Like you before. Marquises, even dukes who wanted to fly from France, reach England or some other equally accursed country, and there try to rouse foreign feeling against the glorious revolution, or to raise an army in order to liberate the wretched prisoners of the Temple, who had once called themselves sovereigns of France. But they were nearly always caught at the barricades. Sergeant Bibot, especially at the West Gate, had a wonderful nose for scenting an aristo in the most perfect disguise. Then, of course, the fun began. Bibot would look at his prey as a cat looks upon a mouse, play with him, sometimes for a quarter of an hour, pretend to be hoodwinked by the disguise, by the wigs and other bits of theatrical makeup, which hid the identity of a ci-devant noble, marquise, or count. Oh, Bibot had a keen sense of humor, and it was well worth hanging round that west barricade in order to see him catch an aristo in the very act of trying to flee from the vengeance of the people. I would say so. Sometimes Bibot would let his prey actually out by the gates, allowing him to think for the space of 2 minutes at least that he really had escaped out of Paris, and might even manage to reach the coast of England in safety. But Bibot would let the unfortunate wretch walk about 10 meters towards the open country. Then he would send 2 men after him and bring him back, stripped of his disguise. Oh, that was extremely funny. For as often as not, the fugitive would prove to be a woman, some proud marchioness, who looked terribly comical when she found herself in Bibot's clutches after all, and knew that a summary trial would await her the next day, and after that, the fond embrace of Madame la Guillotine. No wonder that on this fine afternoon in September, the crowd round Bibot's gate was eager and excited. The lust of blood grows with its satisfaction. There is no satiety. The crowd had seen 100 noble heads fall beneath the guillotine today. It wanted to make sure that it would see another 100 fall on the morrow. Just a sec. Okay, sorry. I just had to check something real quick. Bibot was sitting on an overturned and empty cask close by the gate of the barricade. A small detachment of the citoyen, citizen, soldiers was under his command. The work had been very hot lately. Those cursed aristos were becoming terrified and tried their hardest to slip out of Paris. Men, women, and children, whose ancestors, even in remote ages, had served those traitorous Bourbons, were all traitors themselves and ripe food for the guillotine. Every day, Bibot had the satisfaction of unmasking some fugitive royalists and sending them back to be tried by the Committee of Public Safety, presided over by that good patriot, Citoyen Fouquier-Tinville. And we're going to learn from this lengthier footnote who that is. I don't remember who that is. Antoine Quentin Fouquier-Tinville was the public prosecutor of the Revolutionary Tribunal, a court reserved for political crimes. Born in 1746 and beheaded in 1795, Fouquier-Tinville became the public prosecutor of the Revolutionary Tribunal in March 1793. He had the right to arrest and prosecute, quote, the enemies of the people, end quote, and seek the death penalty. He held this post for 17 months, delivering more than 2,000 guilty verdicts and very few acquittals. Among the guilty were such nobles as Queen Marie Antoinette and her daughter Madame Elizabeth, Charlotte Corday, Chrétien Guillaume, Malesherbes, Georges Danton, and Madame Roland. Although Fouquier-Tinville communicated regularly with the Committee of Public Safety about trials, he did not preside over this committee as the text states. He was guillotined in May 1795 after a trial lasting 41 days. The name Fouquier-Tinville is synonymous with the implacable cruelty of the Reign of Terror. or how sometimes there are revolutionary movements that can eat their own. That happens. Certainly happened in the French Revolution. Where was I? Robespierre and Danton had both had commended Bigot for his zeal, and Bigot was proud of the fact that he, on his own initiative, had sent at least 50 aristos to the guillotine. Another footnote. Maximilien de Robespierre trained as a lawyer and was elected deputy of the Third Estate. He belonged to the Jacobin party and was among the first to support universal suffrage. Robespierre played a central role in the revolution after the king's fall from power in August 1792. He was one of the leaders of the Montagnards, a group famous for extremist opinions, and contributed to this group's defeat on the moderate Girardin party. Robespierre played the old Christian religion with a civic cult that observed several new holidays, such as the Festival of the Supreme Being. He also inspired the law of 22 Prairial en deux, which instituted the terror. This law prevented the accused from defending themselves or from appealing the court's decision. Although successful, Robespierre was soon contested by his adversaries. In July 1794, he was arrested and judged along with Louis de Saint-Just and others. Fouquier-Tinville condemned his former leader. He was executed on July 28, 1794, at the Place de Révélation, today's Place de la Concorde. The series of adventures of the Scarlet Pimpernel end at this historical moment. Georges Danton came from a small bourgeois family, studied law, and was named lawyer for the King's Council in 1787. He belonged to the Cordelier Club, over which he was to preside at a later date. Danton was famous for his oratorical skills. He became Minister of Justice on August 10, 1792, and was elected deputy the following month. In January 1793, he voted in favor of executing King Louis XVI. Roman numerals. He presided over the Revolutionary Tribunal and joined the Committee for Public Safety in April 1793, but he was soon demoted in favor of Robespierre. Politically isolated, Danton was arrested on March 30th, 1794, and accused of being an enemy of the Republic. When he appeared before the Revolutionary Tribunal, he fought eloquently in his defense. He was condemned and executed on April 5th, 1794. So, not eloquent enough, apparently. Okay, we still have quite a bit of chapter 1. Jesus. What? Did I skip a page? Okay. But today, all the sergeants in command at the various barricades had had special orders. Recently, a very great number of aristos had succeeded in escaping out of France and in reaching England safely. There were curious rumors about these escapes. They had become very frequent and singularly daring. The people's minds were becoming strangely excited about it all. Sergeant Grospierre, had been sent to the guillotine for allowing a whole family of aristos to slip out of the North Gate under his very nose. It was asserted that these escapes were organized by a band of Englishmen. Okay, another footnote. I guess I'll finish the sentence. Whose daring seemed to be unparalleled, and who, from sheer desire to meddle in what did not concern them, spent their spare time in snatching away lawful victims destined for Madame la Guillotine. These rumors soon grew in extravagance. Oh wait, that's the end of the sentence. Okay. This reference to the daring Englishman brings to mind Honoré de Balzac's trilogy, The 13, which also treats secret societies in Paris. The trilogy comprises three novellas, Farragus, the Duchess of Langeais, and The Girl with the Golden Eyes. These rumors soon grew in extravagance. There was no doubt that this band of meddlesome Englishmen did exist. Moreover, they seemed to be under the leadership of a man whose pluck and audacity were almost fabulous. Strange stories were afloat of how he and those aristos whom he rescued became suddenly invisible as they reached the barricades and escaped out of the gates by sheer supernatural agency. No one had seen these mysterious Englishmen. As for their leader, he was never spoken of, save with a superstitious shudder. Citoyen Fouquier-Tinville would in the course of the day receive a scrap of paper from some mysterious source. Sometimes he would find it in the pocket of his coat. At others, it would be handed to him by someone in the crowd, whilst he was on his way to the sitting of the Committee of Public Safety. The paper always contained a brief notice that the band of meddlesome Englishmen were at work, and it was always signed with a device drawn in red, a little star-shaped flower, which we in England call the Scarlet Pimpernel. Within a few hours of the receipt of this impudent notice, the citoyens of the Committee of Public Safety would hear that so many royalists and aristocrats had succeeded in reaching the coast, and were on their way to England and safety. Okay. I think that's where I'm going to have to end things. We still have a little bit left of the chapter. Let's see, how long is chapter 2? Depending. I may be able to read a couple on Monday. Okay. Let's end there. We actually were able to get into the body of the novel. The body of the novel. Body language. Okay. I know that was kind of an abrupt ending, but just trying to pace myself and make sure that we're still getting in some reading. Well, hello, Slick Eye. How are you doing? I was just reading The Scarlet Pimpernel, the book, and I'm actually about to sign off for the day. I'm doing all right. It's nice that it's the weekend. Glad to hear that you're doing well. If you're interested in more political commentary, culture commentary, literature, I stream Monday through Friday around 2:30 to 6:30 p.m. Mountain Time. So you can catch me then. I'd love to see you again. I'm going to be signing off, but I'll be back on Monday. I hope you have a good rest of your day, evening, wherever you are, and I will see you soon, hopefully. Okay. All right, I'll see you later. Okay, bye.